It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions.
Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Had a great show yesterday, really in depth. Went through a lot of topics, very, very in depth. So today, following up when we've been, trying to get back to the routine we had before, doing much more consecutive shows. It's odd to do the next day and feel like, looking for things. Just today, kind of jokingly, today we're going to go over a lot of things that I just think are, stories that I would like when we're focusing on larger things going on, for example, like a deep dive on one story or another. Sometimes the smaller things get pushed to the side or not necessarily less important. But today I pulled in a bunch of different things that I wanted to talk about that I thought were really interesting. Some things that I've seen today for the first time, other things that I've had kind of around for a while, and some of the things we've touched on frequently on this show, but a lot to cover today. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy the show today. There's a lot of different kind of overview points of the, partisan dynamics and Trump and Elon. We're going to talk about that to start really in one of the earlier parts. It's not to say that I'm necessarily convinced that what's happening is false, but just that there's actually about an hour ago, I saw one more thing that really put me over the edge. I said, okay, now I'm officially suspect about what this is. But I think there's a reason to be suspect. And we'll go into what, the different historical overlaps, the common way that when there's a new moment to be made or a new movement to be created in order to circumvent what's happening, you always find these kind of things happen where a character will step outside and I finally see through everything and I'm going to start and then it turns out to be one more thing that brings you back in. Even Gabbard feels like that to me, as we're now seeing. But so my point is we should always ask that question. Is this contrived? Is this a reaction to the fact that we didn't buy what happened first? And this is to create some new party to drive, all that we should be asking. But I'll go through reasons I don't think that suggest that might not be the case as well. But there's a lot that's happening right now that really stands out to me is at least what we've seen kind of the structure of how these things have gone before. So we'll go over that today. And, both sides of it, like I said, also talk about what it might mean if Elon Musk genuinely is breaking away. To be clear about it. It's not just the fact that these two people who are public figures are fighting. It's about the implications of the most powerful person, arguably as the president in this country, splitting with his chief ally, as it's been for a long time, and also one of the most influential, powerful, and rich people on the planet. That just seems obviously important to just the dynamics of this government, but also all the many things they're involved in, from Elon Musk and his contracts with the U.S. government and others, the different countries around the world that are like overlap with different genocides and foreign policy elements of the U.S., where he's involved with Starlink. And there's just so many intertwined points. And for this to be happening, honestly, to get ahead of it, that's one of the reasons why I'm suspect about this. How in the world that can even be decoupled is beyond me. But maybe they're just too full of ego to care, but we'll go through it. But we're going to talk about quite a bit today and just interesting things. We'll start with a couple of different points around health that as I'm sure you've all seen, we've never, ever really stopped covering this story. It has to keep being covered. But there's a lot of stuff that just, there's a lot of moving parts to this. I'm really waiting for some kind of next move in a big sense to be able to really, whatever we all kind of expect, whether some new event that happens to rationalize some new step or whether it is a real thing that's rationalized, the same kind of thing. So talking about different points of RFK Jr. and the Maha movement and the contradictions therein. We'll talk about the start. Susan Manares, the handpicked nominee for CDC director, which I just stands out as an obvious, not what we would expect from a Maha choice. And we'll go through that. We're going to talk about some overlaps of COVID-19 and accusations against Fauci, which I think are going to be hollow, seeing as how it's almost like they're going out of their way. A lot of it revolves around the conversation from the recent Tucker interview. And the one part about Fauci and mRNA seems like they were doing mental gymnastics to not mention that Trump was the person that was involved in controlling that whole thing the whole time. And we'll go over why it's more than one party. as well as the direction of the mRNA and where this goes, seeing as how they're acting like on that interview that this is something that we're, very skeptical of, except at the same time saying that the science shows that it's totally okay. We're being snowed. I think it's very obvious when it comes to that. But we're going to talk about early in the first segment something that relates to health that really was just interesting. And this has to do with something that came out today, and alarming to be clear, and gross, but CBS News and others, billions of flies to be dumped out of planes in an effort to fight flesh-eating maggot known as the man-eater over Texas and Mexico. We're going to talk about that in the beginning section here. My joke to somebody was like, so are they trying to start a pandemic? We'll go through it. And the very clear evidence that shows that a billion flies or a lot of flies, it's almost a guarantee to cause some kind of increased illness for a lot of historic reasons. But, we'll go over the back and forth of that and what that means and why they claim they're doing it. Talking about some technocratic overlaps that I think are important that we briefly touched on, but I think are relevant to talk about again today as it connects to other stories we're going into. Some two-party illusion stuff that I think is important that connect to all the other parts, but really about how they're using these narratives to try to drive you into, some cases one, but two camps, it seems. People are choosing their sides between Musk and Elon, and I think that's also it feels contrived, and overlapping that with a point that, again, doesn't necessarily have to be included today, but an interesting overlap to Butler and Donald Trump and the alleged assassination and information to think about today in the larger picture and how interesting it is to think about now with things that we can look at. And then again, Elon Musk and that division and kind of like the whole thing of him. What happened to Doge and what happened, like not the narrative and the statements, but with his involvement and what's actually happening now. Did it just peter out? Or is it just something we're ignoring? Like, it's a very strange evolution of events lately with all of these things, especially down the middle of the division of the MAGA movement where, 30 seconds ago, the world was going to change because of Elon. And now it's suddenly, we're not sure. People like Cat Turner have just turned on him all of a sudden, like you'd expect. But then we're also going to talk about foreign policy, Iran, Gaza, and the fake ceasefire yet again, and some other foreign policy points to not rattle it off to start. But again, with the fake ceasefire, again, which we all expected. Anybody honest has been paying attention, even remotely for the entire time, goes the same way every single time from Trump to Biden or anybody else. The offer gets shown, or who knows if that's even the case, to Israel, and Israel agrees, and they go, the ceasefire is an agreement, and we hope Hamas is on board too. Or really the framing is to make it sound like, we're waiting for Hamas's response when they haven't even been shown the documents yet. And then when they look at it, the response somehow becomes like they're not sure about the ceasefire. It hasn't even started yet. And now when they come back and say, well, this is the same old reason that we said no last time, they go, they're not accepting the ceasefire. It's like, it's just the same tired series of events. And we'll go over where that is and where the current reality is for both Iran, Gaza, and some points on Syria. But let's start with some overarching points that I think are important to cover, and then we'll get into some health. Or rather, actually, I take it back. I moved some things around. We're going to start right with the health topic today. So tune in, guys. Lots to talk about. Let me know in the chat what you're thinking. I try to pay attention as best I can. I don't think I had any notes to get into to start. I think I've won. Is why I said that, and I can't remember. So let's get started. This is just something that I thought was funny, that kind of really does have an overarching point to just a lot of what we talk about. And I love Sal the Agorist in general. I think he's, very humorous in a lot of the ways he puts together, valid criticism. This is just this. I thought this was hilarious because of the meme that we've seen of that girl. And it's actually a video, but, become a meme, which I guess videos are memes. But, the point is it's a meme in and of itself, the idea. And then the video is how it was known of this girl in the purple shirt as a child that has that face she gives. You can see it for not on the podcast right there. It's like just that skeptical face. Like, what are you talking about? And it's been used so many times. And it's very funny. For those in the podcast, you got to look at the picture. And then, I don't know if you saw this. This happened a minute ago, but she, as an adult, put a picture out and in the same, fake strap and the seat, was just hilarious. And so, or at least as far as I understand it, maybe it was somebody else that looks like her. I kind of just assumed, which is just because of the meme, that it might have been the same person. That's why it was funny. Either way, the point is them on the first one, the Patriot Act is only temporary. The Patriot Act, all this time later, same face. 30 years later, it's like, that's the whole thing, guys. And every single thing, in fact, off the top of my head, Jason Bassler put out something on his Instagram. I can't remember off the top of my head, but listed off all the kind of things. When they say security, it means this. When they say that, it means this. Historically, it's exactly what always seems to happen. Whether they're by design or not in their minds, it's consistent. So everything we're talking about, whether it's what's in the bill and the different biometric overlaps, AI, or the things that we argue are necessary but we don't really want, yeah, they're not going away, guys. History shows us that. Anybody honest has always told you that. Even people people like Messi or people like RFK Jr. will tell you that. When you give power away, they never give it back. Except for narrative today that Trump says, or narrative that Biden or whoever the Democrat becomes tomorrow says today, that becomes the reason why it's an exception for right now. But that's the partisan field, dwindling by the moment. And I think we all notice that. So starting in health, Sasha Latapova put out a statement around what RFK Jr. recently said. And she said, well, let me play this first and I'll read her statement. Sense Receptor put this out saying, this was June 30th was when the interview was. Tucker Carlson asked RFK Jr. if the COVID vax killed more than it saved. Before he even answers, you already know this answer. 1, because the facts are clear. 2, because we've shown you the science repeatedly every time it comes to pass. And 3, because he told you that before he got to this position. And even this statement makes it feel like maybe they play this game where they allow you to think that he's kind of playing the political game, but we wink, wink, know what he actually means, except his actions to this point, which is fair, show you the opposite. Who knows? Maybe tomorrow something will spin around that changes the whole story. But as of right now, you're being lied to. mRNA platforms, mRNA shots. So let's listen to what he has to say and try to make sense of this.
Pfizer vaccine, when it came out, it had a higher all-cause mortality, so more people died in the placebo group. More people died in the vaccine group than in the placebo group. I had 20,000 people who got the vaccine, 20,000 who didn't. And after 6 months, they looked at it, and there was 23% more deaths in the vaccinated group from all causes.
Yeah, you know that because you watch this show. And I don't remember if he pointed that out at the time, but he has been critical of this well before he became this position. But you know that information because we covered that as it came out. Every single time new information came out. In fact, well before it did, along with a lot of us who were simply looking at their own data and saying, look, they're lying. Look at the information. Look at how they're altering this to show you a wrong picture. It's all come out now. Right. But that was stuff that we were showing, and a lot of us going to the actual trial science and saying, look at what it says. That's not what they're claiming. And he also makes the point of why they claimed 100%. Wildly dishonest. There's nobody in the room, nobody in any honest position, or nobody in any position that's honest, that would argue what he's about to tell you adds up to 100% effective. They knew they were lying to you from day one, and we have to be honest about that. And so even these kind of wishy-washy kind of statements, they worry me.
Than in the placebo group, and the efficacy was kind of dubious because
well, yeah,
there was only 2 people who died from COVID in the placebo group, and there was.
Is that video out of sync for you guys? Let me know in the chat. Is that video acting funny, or is it just on my end? I won't stop it again if it's just on my end. Always something going on here. It's just the way it works for us. It was acting all funny, and the audio's out of sync with the words. Let me know if that's happening. I'll try to, maybe I can refresh it.
COVID in the vaccine group, and that's
Here, let me do this real quick. See if it helps. Yeah, somebody's saying it's out of sync. Okay, it's not just me. See if this fixes it.
Pfizer vaccine, when it.
I guess not. Well, let's just listen to the audio, guys. It's not necessary to really see their faces, but it's obviously you can see that it's RFK Jr. and Tucker Carlson. Just listen to the audio, and I'll put it where it was.
Placebo group, and the efficacy was kind of dubious because
well, yeah,
there was only 2 people who died from COVID in the placebo group, and there was 1 person who died from COVID in the vaccine group, and that's the whole data set they were looking at. And so they said, you remember they were saying the vaccine is 100% effective. Well, that's why they were saying it, because there was 2 was 100% of 1, right? 100% larger than 1. So but that's what they had. But they were telling the American people, oh, it's 100% effective. And that when people heard that, they thought, if you get the vaccine, you can't get COVID, which of course now everybody realizes was wrong.
Yeah, we said that at the time, by the way. You know we did. And we were one of the earlier ones to say that, but there were a lot of us because we looked at the facts.
Because everybody got COVID, whether they got the vaccine or not. And You know, what they really should have been telling people is that in order to prevent one death from COVID, you had to give 19,999 vaccines. If any of those vaccines were killing people, you would cancel out the effect.
And they were. And on top of that, whether it's death or not, we know that there was a shockingly high amount of very serious side effects, which just as much cancels it out for me.
Of, you know, the beneficial effect.
Do you think the COVID, I mean, net, as we say in business, just kidding. Do you think overall the COVID vax killed more than it saved?
My opinion about that is irrelevant. What we're going to try to do is make that science available so the public can look at the science.
Yeah.
And I would not say one way or the other. And the truth is, I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because the studies that were done by my agency were substandard, and they were not designed to answer that question.
You realize how dishonest that is to act like we don't know? Like, then why did he say that before he got in this position? Were you lying then, or are you trying to make it political now? Look, I agree. The science that they did was deliberately deceptive, but it's not only from your broken agencies that we know this stuff. We know this from around the world. We know this from other independent researchers, and we also know it from the information we did get from your studies that aren't necessarily broken, the information they tried to hide. But the point is, we can see these things. And look, I mean, we're really going to pretend like we can't just objectively look around and recognize how obvious it is that these things are deadly. It just bothers me that, because right now you understand that somebody might be on the fence and hears that and go, okay, they might decide to do it or might decide to wait. And they might not understand that that's not his real opinion. At least it wasn't before. And by the way, I just checked the video from my side on my computer, and it's perfectly fine. So I guess it's StreamYard. Who knows why? Maybe it's just me. Wouldn't surprise me today, but who cares? Let's keep going. The interesting point, though, well, let me finish. I think that was, there's one more minute, I think.
And there's been a lot of obfuscation. We're going to try to do is make that science available. 99 vaccines. If any of those vaccines were killing people.
I mean, net, as we say in business, just kidding. Do you think overall the COVID vax killed more than it saved?
My opinion about that is irrelevant.
Why would that be irrelevant? Why are you not the head of HHS? It's like you are the opinion that is relevant more than anybody. This just kills me because that is, I think, you could argue. Look, let's just say he makes all the right choices following this. You could argue that maybe he was trying to save himself some flack. You know me. I am not going to go. You're not being honest. That is not a principled stance, even if you think it's at the end of the day, more beneficial. And you could even argue that I'm wrong in that. I'm just simply saying that more than ever, because of the way we are in the world or where we are with these governments, we have to demand absolute adherence to principles. If you think that, then tell us the truth. I don't care if it causes you problem. That's why we put you there if you believe that. I don't. I'm just saying from the mindset of people, you were elected to this position, not to play the political game, but to act for what the people who put you there wanted. Isn't that the whole lie we tell ourselves? This frustrates me.
What we're going to try to do is make that science available so the public can look at the science.
Yeah.
It's already there.
And I would not say one way or the other. And the truth is, I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because the studies that were done by my agency were substandard, and they were not designed to answer that question. And there's been a lot of obfuscation about covering up, as you know, about suppressing any kind of discussion of vaccine injuries. I mean,
yeah. And who was the president while that was happening again? Well, both. But I mean, realistically, guys, you have to understand that Fauci, the main dynamic in this, and Donald Trump were the two. I mean, he started Operation Warp Speed. I mean, I don't need to go through all the talking points. Everybody knows this. Most people try to hide from it right now. But realistically, it's very strange. We'll come to the Fauci point in a second. But let's find out if the rest of these videos are the same way. That would tell us something, won't it? But here, and I want to play this since he mentions this. And because this is a quick clip, but this is actually really important. I tried to play this as often as I could when it was relevant during the whole COVID, in the midst of the COVID-19 illusion. And that is when they chose, and guys, this is one of I really should make a list of the different points, and there were tons of them, where it's undeniable that you look at what the decision that was made and then you look at the outcome and you look at all the information that was there, and it's impossible not to see that they chose the direction, not to say necessarily on purpose, but they chose the direction that maximized the negative outcome. Now, I do believe it's almost near mathematically impossible to accidentally do the absolute worst thing in every possible point. But my point is, in this case, relative risk reduction versus absolute risk reduction. And it's clear, even before this, that they had acknowledged that this was a manipulative tool, and they did it anyway. And that's his point about the 100, 200 to 100. Like, that's the relative risk. That's how they lied to you. And this makes this point clear in case you didn't understand what he was talking about.
And you have the right to know the potential benefit of any intervention.
Note that video is okay, so clearly, who knows?
For example, Pfizer reported that its vaccine shows a 95% efficacy. That sounds like it protects you 95% of the time, right? But that's not actually what that number means. That 95% refers to the relative risk reduction, but it doesn't tell you how much your overall risk is reduced by vaccination. For that, we need absolute risk reduction. In the Pfizer trial, 8 out of 18,198 people who were given the vaccine developed COVID-19. In the unvaccinated placebo group, 162 people got it, which means that even without the vaccine, the risk of contracting COVID-19 was extremely low at 0.88%, which the vaccine then reduced to 0.04%. So the net benefit, or the absolute risk reduction that you're being offered with a Pfizer vaccine, is 0.84%. That 95% number, that refers to the relative difference between 0.88 and 0.04%. That's what they call 95% relative risk reduction. And relative risk reduction is well known to be a misleading number, which is why the FDA recommends using absolute risk reduction instead. Which begs the question, how many people would have chosen to take the COVID-19 vaccines had they understood that they offered less than 1% benefit?
Yeah, pretty sure basically nobody. Right. And that because there's very few people out there that would decide to take a dangerous thing because of political interests. I mean, at least I'd like to believe. That sounds pretty, but who knows today? But that's, I think, a very important understanding, of why and how that manipulation was played. Now, Sasha Latapova says the science with the $, which is making a point. It's a quote, the science, I am telling you the science, stupid. It says, I am sick and tired of the HHS still lying about COVID and mRNA being a matter of science. It's a matter of war. And what her point is that this is a military countermeasure. This is Operation Warp Speed. You can from the very beginning, from the moment this started with Moncef Slaoui and Warp Speed and the pharmacovigilance and the way that they set this up, this was an experiment. This was a military countermeasure, and there's a reason they did it that way for all the reasons we see with the UAE and the way this ended up. They made this happen, and they watched how it happened, and they act like they're now, of course, each side points to the other, and it's just the way this always works, guys. But I don't think it's working like it used to. The whole left-right paradigm illusion. But she says it's a matter of war, a military attack on society, which RFK Jr. had no problem recognizing before he stepped into the position, and almost unlimited power over the issue. Per the PrEP Act. Now it's a case of sudden amnesia. She's been calling this out from the beginning, and people who have principles are not stupid. You can recognize, like his support of the MMR shot. Anybody who's still supporting he is a 180 on some of his core issues right now. And again, if he tomorrow decides to roll out the right direction and says, I was fooling you to get it done, well, I'll still criticize the way he did that. But I don't think that's what's going to happen, because I think it matters the way it's done. Now, here is another example. RFK Jr.'s allegedly hand-picked CDC director nominee, Susan, I think it's Monarez. Here's what she had to say about the FDA mRNA injections and the science around it.
Thoughts about the safety of mRNA vaccine in general?
The FDA has, in the production of the COVID-19 vaccine, had approved the mRNA vaccines as safe and had demonstrated efficacy associated with them.
Oh, you mean the science that he just told you was faulty? Okay, glad we're on the same page.
So you would not be prejudiced from the get-go against such a platform, such a vaccine built upon a platform, whether it's for COVID, flu, for Lyme disease, or anything else?
Yeah, before she answers, like the Stargate platform, right? Like Stargate, right? Like his HHS universal flu platform, and all the things they're currently working on. Just so you understand, that's not a hypothetical. They're already being done by the people that act like they're skeptical of it.
But I have no a priori prejudice against
Such a vaccine built upon a platform, whether it's for COVID, flu, for Lyme disease, or anything else?
That is what I have no a priori prejudice against mRNA platform or any other approach that is being taken to develop vaccines. And that is why we have safety and efficacy standards that the FDA puts in place for any of these medical product trials.
Yeah, which they spectacularly failed on. And you could call deliberately so, it wasn't a fail. Pretty clear many of these choices were not by accident. But that you realize she's pointing to the process that we all went through. That the vast majority of people left and right seem to be aware we were lied to about, that they're all seem to be even admitting right now, including RFK Jr., but this is her testimony. Seems pretty strange.
To ensure that anything that is being developed, we can have the confidence that we can put it in ourselves and our children, our family members.
So then you, as the CDC director, responsible for setting the ACIP agenda, would not shrink from the recommendation of such a vaccine. Would you also recommend that the 17 members be constituted with those who actually have experience with mRNA research and could know both sides of the safety discussion?
Yeah, we absolutely need highly trained scientists and medical professionals to be able to participate in the ACIP meeting. If they don't have deep technical knowledge in mRNA, they have to be able to understand complicated scientific information, and they have to have the temerity to ask questions to make sure that they have clarity of understanding of information that is being presented to them.
Yeah, technical information and technical knowledge and know-how is super important. Also, honesty and integrity and principles, just throwing it out there. Just because they know what they're talking about is never a good indication that they're going to care about the outcome or the information or that it's done the way we want it to be done. Now, I want to make clear, I'm not suggesting in any way that I know this person is just dishonest. I don't know that. Very just as likely out there. Well, I shouldn't say just as likely. Look, we all know how obvious this information is. That's not to say that there's people, she could very well believe what she's saying. I just want to be objective about that, make it clear that we shouldn't assume that these people are all choosing to do so. That's important to think about. That's about your integrity and your principles. Don't just assume like the ridiculous mainstream alternative media does. Prove it. Okay. But until then, we don't know for sure. That's just being honest. So my point though, is that what she's pointing to and what she just said contradicts what RFK said. And so we have to be honest about what that shows us. Now here is, the next one here. This is Champagne Joshi. Mega thread on Susan Monarez, RFK Jr.'s hand-picked candidate to run the CDC. Not a doctor, not a frontline scientist. She is a biotech insider. Yeah, because that's where the world is going, right? Or at least that's what they tell you. Or what they don't tell you, and they force it in while telling you what you want to hear. She's a biotech insider who spent 20 years building public-private partnerships, like the World Economic Forum, between the Fed and Big Pharma. Right. So you can't FOIA it. You can't see what's going on. Isn't that what we all ask for? If confirmed, she'd be the first CDC director without a medical degree in 70 plus years. Now, look, that doesn't necessarily worry me. Like if that was the only thing, I'd say, okay, I'm willing to give her a chance, seeing as how, as I just said, that's not necessarily the only thing that matters, especially if you're the one directing and you have a lot of people beneath you that are the ones with the technical knowledge. But it does matter. It's an interesting deviation. I almost feel like that's a way to make it seem like, the people that want to support anything but the normal and act like that means it's good will just go, yay, it's not a doctor. Well, it's not. I mean, that seems like an odd decision with everything else we're talking about. But not a doctor, being a biotech. I mean, you see the direction it's going in, and it gets more interesting. Spent her career not regulating industry, but helping it navigate and exploit the federal health bureaucracy. It says she's been, I realize this is Josh's research on it. Look it up for yourself, but all the links are here as usual. She's been embedded at BARDA, DHS, and NSC, ARPA-H, and now she's poised to lead the CDC. She earned her PhD in microbiology and immunology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2003, where her dissertation research focused on developing technology to prevent, diagnose, and treat infectious diseases, particularly those affecting low and middle income families or countries, excuse me. And he says, here's where, See, great. Twitter does this to me every time. In 2015, article from AAAS provides a list of alumni that have went on to work at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, which was established by Congress. Here's where it gets interesting. He points out at BARDA, HHS, she helped stand up Project BioShield, funneling billions. See, stupid platform. Here we go. Funneling billions into pharmaceutical countermeasures. That's what we were just the military biomedical countermeasures is the main point for theoretical CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. BARDA stands for Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. It's basically DARPA for the biomedical field. Oh, they really overlap, to be quite clear. Project BioShield is the same program that gave us those shady COVID vaccine contracts. The same one that built the pandemic industrial complex. Brief background of the Project BioShield you can read for yourself. It's a great thread you should read through in depth. Operation Warp Speed 2020 used BARDA as its funding hub, deploying over $2 billion to vaccine developers, including Moderna, AstraZeneca, under Trump's administration. BARDA's internal system, BEAM, collected expansive data from vaccine manufacturers and production, logistics, distribution, collecting of data as well. Senior BARDA official Menarez was part of the team empowering the system, allocating billions to private firms and navigating accelerated pathways. These early choices enabled the rapid COVID contracts later executed under Operation Warp Speed. Now, again, you could argue that she believes in all of this, that she thinks this is the path to take. We really shouldn't just jump the gun and assume what her intentions are. But the point is to recognize that from my perspective, and I would argue from people under Maha, that this is not the direction that they expected. Maybe you disagree, point it out. It's a great thread. Check it out. Give him a follow. Now, here under that same post, Chief Nerd, he also points this out, Josh Walko, Champagne Joshy. He says, I'll just leave this here. Here is the new nominee, Susan Menarez, on DARPA TV, of course, discussing how AI will accelerate better health outcomes for all of us. Now, again, most of them actually probably believe that. That's where the direction is being forced, in my opinion. So thinking about the direction, this seems to be biotech, AI, that is what that's everything for them right now. So I think that's why she's being chosen. Here, Taylor Hudak points out, to bring it to that AI point, back to the interview as well, she says, this is so bad. I agree. Ariel, maybe, Cohen. Not familiar with his account, but I follow him because of this. I think it's a great kind of put together information. Says Secretary Kennedy says that the FDA is going to accelerate drug approvals with AI by skipping animal trials. I'll play the clip for you. Again, how is that what we asked for? It's not, guys. This is the efficiency that you thought was going to come through due diligence and research. No, it's going to be AI, right? And we're just every other thing we're seeing is like this. Skipping animal trials was exactly how we ended up in the first place with the damage, the early, or at least the claims anyway. Again, my point is that I think a lot of this was deliberate, but the early aspect we realized when they skipped those animal trials, that is where they would have picked up on the signals that showed us a lot of the things that were happening. Everybody honest was saying that. And now we look back and go, oh, now we see it. Yeah, we would have caught it. I think that was a choice. Here, same thing. Maybe AI will be more diligent. Maybe it'll find more. Maybe not, though. Or maybe it can be used to hide things because these people are dictating, controlling, using these tools. It says, I've watched the entire Tucker Carlson interview with RFK Jr. I was already familiar with most of the information presented there. RFK Jr. has been repeating this info for a while now. He says, however, the short clip that I extracted is my take from it. And it is extremely concerning, especially coming from Maha. Quote, even that system is antiquated because we have access to AI. We are creating here at HHS an AI revolution. Don't think that was of course you get the people out there that are going to say, we all voted for this, even though this wasn't even really brought up in the context of, happening like this. Everything they say is framed as this is what we voted for from the people that want everyone else to think that. It's not what's going on. And he has a whole thread here. I'm going to play the clip for you. You can check it out for yourself.
We're going to absolutely change VAERS, and we're going to make it, we're going to create either within VAERS.
Okay, the only way I can make sense of this, actually, I don't even know how this makes sense because it's the video. I shouldn't go into it now, but I'm just interested. The video is okay on my side when I play it on my computer. The last one was okay. The only difference is that I downloaded these today versus one that I've had forever. So I just don't know how that makes sense. How can they be okay on my end, but only the newer videos I downloaded are having that issue versus the old ones? Seems like a specifically applied problem. That's just very strange to me. I don't know. Let me know if you think there's anything to it.
Or supplementary to VAERS, a system that actually works. Oh, and
VAERS works, by the way, exactly the way it's designed to work. They just lied to everybody about what that was. It is a signal system. It was never designed to prove anything. They knew that. They lied about it. He knows that. He said that before more than once. Here we are again with more new information from somebody who already has opinions stated before.
Within VAERS, or supplementary to VAERS, a system that actually works. Oh, and that right now, even that system is antiquated because we have access to AI. And one of the, we are creating here at HHS an AI revolution. We've been able to attract the top people from Silicon Valley, people who've walked away from billion-dollar businesses, and they don't want prestige, they don't want position, they don't want power, they want to change, they want to make the system work. And we are at the cutting edge of AI. We're implementing it in all of our departments. At FDA, we're accelerating drug approvals. So that you don't need to use primates or even animal models. You can do the drug approvals very, very quickly with it.
Since this is something people are pointing out in the chat as well, I want to clarify, and I've made this clear before. I don't support animal trials in general. I think it's a horrifying thing to put animals through. My point, though, is not about my desire for the new direction, but more so, I mean, frankly, I don't think any of this should be happening in an entire sense. But my point is that what we understand, like from their perspective and what we're told about the process, is that that's how they end up finding those things. Not that I'm saying we should do them, as much as that may sound contradictory. I'm saying that if I had a choice, none of these things would probably even exist. The point is that ultimately that process and the way they do that is where a lot of these signals come up using AI can easily be manipulated. But the point in the chat is, which I agree with, animal trials are also very easily manipulated, or all of these are. My point is that the AI is something that becomes very difficult to walk back and verify. With the trials, at the very least, human or otherwise, they at least have some level of data they put out. There's real people involved. There's ways to eventually trip them up and find the mistakes. With AI, I'm arguing that's going to become near impossible to find out without newer level investigatory tools, which most of us probably don't know how to use. So I just think that's important to point out. But to clarify about the animal trials point, my opinion. Half the time I care more about animals than anything else. In the people in the world that, my dog, for example, is something that is very important to me. And I find that people that don't see animals as, deserving as just as much compassion and everything as people, I find that to be a hard thing to understand. Or people that treat animals like things they can buy and discard, that tells me a lot about the kind of person they are. Just on a side note.
AI. To use primates or even animal models, you can do the drug approvals very, very quickly with AI. And we're also implementing it at CMS to detect waste, abuse, and fraud, it's extraordinary at that. But we're also going to, use it on the...
Very quick note, detecting fraud and these kind of things. It's interesting that I'm seeing a lot of these overlaps with, we're going to get to the deportation point and Atlas, which we'll talk about, which is another software program that I'm very suspicious is overlapped in some way with some of these other groups we're talking about, but I'm not going to make that assumption with evidence to back it up. But I feel like there's something there that I can't find. But the point is that there's all of these different things. That one's for deportation in regard to, an AI system that essentially can decide whether or not you have something they can use to remove your U.S. citizenship as a naturalized citizen. We just talked about that last show. It's a horrifying reality, and it is coming. And even Trump said point blank that both U.S. Americans born here and naturalized are people he's considering if you're a criminal to get out of the country. My point, though, is he's talking about another AI overlap that's detecting fraud. I'm feeling like there's probably something more to these different tools that are being used, more than just finding fraud, more so like a controlling structure of, like in regard to the flow of information, right? How we see what there's presented versus what's actually there. All these things we have to consider today, because like I just said with the first part of AI and the trials, they're a point at which, with a deep fake kind of point, where it's very difficult for most people to be able to discern the difference between something they manufactured versus something that was organically created. And that's why I'm worried about where this all goes in a lot of different facets.
at CDC and throughout our system to look at the metadata that we have and be able to make really good decisions about interventions. For example, if you look at the population as a whole and say, okay, we're using 3 different diabetes drugs or 5 different statin drugs or all these SSRIs and others, you can then look drug by drug and you can tell on the population whether it's working or not and which one is giving you the best bang for the buck and which one has the most side effects. We have a potential now to use AI in ways that are going to revolutionize medicine.
Something we've been predicting, haven't we? With, many different conversations. Let me see if I can even grab this one. What was it? Well, funny enough, this is my coverage of the Stargate thing, but I had an interview with George Webb, and one of them was about AI-created medicine. Yeah, and this was a discussion from a long time ago. But we'll come back to that. I agree with what he's talking about here. He said there's a lot to unpack, short clips, so keep reading the thread. So go through and check it out if you want to see his thoughts on it. I just think what's important to understand is that just like we were worried about, it's an AI drug, it's where they're going with all of this. And if we can't see by now how easy these things are to manipulate from nefarious characters, whether from another country or within, I don't know what else to show you. It's obvious that these things are a dangerous step, at the very least, with where our society is right now. Now, RFK Jr. says Fauci is likely liable for the COVID-19 pandemic in the same interview. Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. says the former White House coronavirus advisor, Anthony Fauci, likely played a large role in the creation of the SARS-CoV-2 and called for an investigatory commission into the United States' involvement in the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, realize he's talking specifically about the idea that Fauci had a hand in creating what they say killed everybody. And realize, I think the majority of people have the mind right now that this is not even what we're actually dealing with, right? That this is a manipulated, whether we had something novel or not, that it was not actually the real issue. Danny Ranku and plenty of others have been putting out peer-reviewed studies that show you that it adds up. The point, though, is that whether or not you think it even existed is one side of it. The other is you're not talking about the actions taken through the illusion of it all, lockdowns and everything else that happened, but rather the origins of it, that everyone wants to pretend, from the one side of the paradigm that it was just China and that was it. And now you're kind of folding in Fauci. Well, I don't know how in the world you could include him and not understand that without question includes Donald Trump. Even are we of the mind that he somehow was doing this behind Trump's back the whole time? It certainly wouldn't surprise me. But then Trump gives him a medal at the end, or everything it doesn't add up. And as we go through, it'll make that more clear. Kennedy, it says in an interview with Tucker Carlson published Monday, said that Fauci, in his role as director of the NIH, funded potentially dangerous research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. You mean like Trump is continuing to do right now. And let's not forget that. Actually, let's grab that one too. See if that can pop up. Yep. Here's the other one. Gain of function head fake. We just talked about this. I honestly think that most people in the conservative side of this still don't even realize that they were lied to about that. Gain of function head fake. Because they came out, this was on May 9th, 2025. And they claimed, I think I might even have, I don't want to search too long, it doesn't stand out to me, but the White House, posting, and it's very clear, black and white. They're going to become the leaders. What first says that they're going to stop the most dangerous gain of function, and then very clearly continue the ones they deem to be acceptable. So I guess we'll just trust that they're doing the not dangerous ones, whatever that means. It's still gain of function, and that they're going to become the leader in the world in that type of gain of function. And that somehow got reported as they're ending gain of function by all the people we always point out who lie to you for partisan reasons. They're lying to you. And so realize that the gain of function process and the gain of function research is still happening right now. And then going back to the 2020 point forward, I proved it to you then as well with their own documentation that when Trump pulled the funding for Wuhan and made a big statement about it, there were other labs in China that were at the same moment getting funding from the US government for that kind of research. And as you all know, it continued in a lot of other ways as well. So I think it's very dishonest to basically say funded potential dangerous research. We know he did, but not him alone, but the U.S. government and multiple administrations, which includes Trump, includes all of them. But my point is, Trump is the one that gets kind of omitted from this conversation. It's all of them. At Wuhan in China, he says that intelligence agencies have assessed could have sparked the COVID pandemic. Carlson specifically asked Kennedy why Joe Biden issued a full preemptive pardon for Fauci on his last day in the White House, which I think is insane that you could pardon someone for unknown things. I actually don't think that even applies, quite frankly. But my point is that I thought that was done to avoid Trump doing it, because that would make sense to people. And so now it's going to act like, oh, our hands are tied. You know, he's got a pardon, even though that's not what they're saying. Like, I'm willing to bet you anything that despite this statement, despite anything else, that will never come to pass. Because how do you go after this without including Trump? And how Trump would be complicit, at the very least, as the leader that was supposed to be overseeing all of this. Like, at best, he turns out to look like a fool. At worst, he's complicit, which I think we all know is the reality. And so here, this won't go to pass. It won't come to pass because it's not something that they want at the end of the day. But they want you to think maybe, and then get distracted by 17 other things that happen tomorrow. It says, oh, and then the pardon was the point. And let's realize that Trump has pardoned plenty of other people and different dynamics that are, I mean, not Fauci and the COVID-19 illusion, but people that were criminals just because they were part of it on his side. And it says, quote, I would be speculating, but I think that he had a lot of liability on creating coronavirus. He was funding precisely that research, and he was giving them the technology. He was? Are we serious? Look, yes, Fauci is a central player in this, but he was an underling to the people who were making these decisions, guys. And as much as they really try to make the case that he was the one dictating all of it, you can see and prove, at the very least, the checkoff, the involvement of the executive branch the entire time. So it's just dishonest to act like it's just him. And this is an attempt to kind of reframe the story as we're trying to get to the bottom of it, but really it's only Fauci. And we'll just execute this in the court of public opinion and leave it alone and let you feel like we did our job. How it tends to go. Meanwhile, the two-party illusion continues on. Former President Obama put a moratorium on gain-of-function in 2014. Following potentially dangerous experiments involving highly lethal avian influenza earlier that decade. The moratorium lasted for 3 years, ending in 2017. Now realize, as we all know, and we proved on the show, that they did not stop in 2014. It didn't. Very easy to prove. They kept doing it, and just like they always do under some different name or just do it anyway. But it says Biden's pardon for Fauci preemptively waived him of liability for any crimes committed between 2014 and 2024. Again, I don't see how that's legal. Overlapping with the Obama era moratorium and the start of the pandemic. Okay, but also in the midst of that is Trump's administration, his involvement in all of that. My point is that if you listen, there seems to be this weird tap dance around that obvious point. Kennedy also referenced the NIH-funded research by University of North Carolina University, or the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, scientist Ralph Barrick, who, before the pandemic, created the technology to conceal whether or not a pathogen had been genetically manipulated in a lab. He's also the one that we talked about with Dr. David Martin and plenty of others that was working on coronavirus, in myocarditis-inducing coronavirus on rabbits in the 90s. He worked on self-spreading coronavirus versions in the labs or in the caves of China. All this is publicly covered. We covered it on this show. How that's not immediately relevant, I mean, it is, and we all know that, but the game becomes it's just this group and this one thing and maybe China alone. It's amazing what people can convince themselves of if it's partisan driven. When Carlson asked if Fauci could ever be prosecuted or otherwise held accountable for funding dangerous research, Kennedy said that the only way forward would be to have a nationwide truth commission. And here we go. JFK and 9/11 and COVID-19. How do those usually go for us? They don't. It's a big, dog and pony show. There's no real outcome. There's a bunch of grandstanding and narratives. And what happens? And realize the past examples of these, like 9/11, like JFK, even at the time, the vast majority of Americans did not believe the Warren Commission was correct. Same with the 9/11 discussion. Same with COVID-19 for that matter. They don't buy it, guys, because there's so many holes in it. It's absurd. So let's do it again, apparently. This is just an exercise in futility, in my opinion. And it says, in those cases, what happens is you have, in the Truth Commission, a commission that hears testimony on what exactly happened. And anybody who comes and volunteers to testify truthfully is then given immunity from prosecution. Oh, great. So they can come in and just admit they did something wrong and they're immune from prosecution? That doesn't seem like that makes sense, but it says just so the public knows who did what. Quote, people who are called and don't take the deal, who perjure themselves, then they can be prosecuted criminally. I mean, it just seems like a pretty weird way to make that. To basically, you could. There's ways you could manipulate that. My point is that why wouldn't they all step forward and lay out the narrative they want you to think? How would you prove them otherwise if there's no evidence already put forward? And on top of that, if they wanted to come forward and say, yes, I did that, isn't he saying right there that they're immune from prosecution? I don't get how this makes sense. Is it about knowing or is it about holding people accountable? Because we already know what happened. He says he's the only one within the Trump administration. Oh, excuse me. He said he's not the only one within the Trump administration's health department who's dubious of the new vaccine technology. Well, forgive me if that rings hollow, seeing as how you have the self-amplifying ARCT 2304 pandemic influenza H5N1 mRNA shot. Yeah, that's happening April 10th. This is very real and still going, and they absolutely endorse this. Or just the Stargate platform in general is an entire platform direction for cancer and other things based on AI, based on mRNA shots. I mean, this is, how can you even for a moment act like you're skeptical? This is like the platform starting point. This is exactly, if you think this is a problem, they took the problem and are standing on it to make these things go forward. The platform, and I'll include that as well. The platform itself. Of course. Oh, there it goes. Of course, it doesn't pop up now. In a peer-reviewed study, by the way, which is included, as always, in the show notes, study finds the mRNA platform itself is driving myocarditis. Now, not the only thing. There's other factors, like all of it for that matter, lipid nanoparticles and mRNA and the spike protein. The point is that the platform itself was causing these problems. The study found many, in fact. And so they're creating the same problem. But just in a general sense, for them to say we're dubious of this and then roll out mRNA shots based on the same faulty science kind of rings hollow, doesn't it? Or the next generation universal flu platform. It's the same thing. Just so generally the point, guys, we're being misled. It's time for us to call this out. And I do see already people doing that in a large sense in the partisan field. Now, on another angle of health that I do think is just very strange and worthy of discussion, this is from CBS News. Billions of flies to be dumped out of planes in an effort to fight flesh-eating maggot known as man-eater. This is posted today. Just seemed crazy. I just don't understand how. I mean, I understand why this happens. We've already seen this kind of, in my opinion, broken logic with mosquitoes, with all sorts of different things, with like edible vaccines they dump for animals, for foxes, and it just everything they're doing. Like this stuff is, in my opinion, consistently shown to be the benefits don't outweigh the risks. That what they're doing with these things cause far more damage, but it doesn't ultimately stop in any of them, and that makes you wonder whether it's about something else. And so I just wanted to pose that thought. Let's read through what we can prove, and then just consider what other agendas might be there, or ask ourselves what might happen if you release 1 billion flies over a certain population. Now it says the U.S. government is preparing to breed billions of flies, dump them out of airplanes over Mexico and southern Texas to fight a flesh-eating maggot. That sounds like the plot of a horror movie, but it's part of the government's plans for protecting the U.S. from a bug that could devastate its beef industry. And then people might consider that maybe that's the point. Maybe it's manufactured, can question everything, don't assume without facts, decimate wildlife, and even kill household pets. This weird science has worked well before. Now, what they're talking about is the same thing we keep hearing about mosquitoes or anything. They're taking these flies, manufacturing sterile flies with whatever tech they're using to manipulate their genetics and putting them out in the open, hoping that they breed, and then claiming that's going to reduce the population. But yet they're here and they've been doing this since the 50s. But, consider for yourself. Obviously, the point is, if you read into it, that this was something they claim was a success, and there was a breakdown at the Darien Gap, and ultimately they think it was about people trafficking, secretly cattle across lines, and that brought them over. And I read a bunch about it today about what they think might have caused the resurgence of this. But my opinion is, as always, these things are either, like for example, if you look at algae blooms. I used to talk about this quite a bit, where they have these random algae blooms that, it's a natural thing. No, it can be, but not like that. And you look into it, what it turns out, but it's also this runoff from this massive plant right here that causes these random blooms that are super toxic. The reality is that the human influence on the environment causes all sorts of crazy things, especially when we're not being respectful of the environment around us. And the reality is that they can do these things by all sorts of corporate things or government actions, by taking down forests and then cause these side effects. And then deal with them in ways that cause more problems, or use their problem to initiate a secret agenda within that. All those things are possible to consider. But in a large sense, though, I do think that we are dealing with the type of people that, even when they're trying to help you, seem to not. I mean, that's that same old thing. The most alarming thing you can hear is, I'm the government and I'm here to help. But yet we still all pretend like their government's going to be there when it suits our partisan interest, or some seem to do. The targeted pest is a flesh-eating larva of the New World's screwworm fly. So it's the maggot, the fly rather of the screwworm fly, and that they have the maggots that are the problem in this. Like the maggot, so the larvae of the flies are what are basically infesting animals and eating the meat of, apparently live animals. The U.S. Department of Agriculture plans to ramp up the breeding and distribution of adult male flies, sterilizing them with radiation before releasing them. Now, one of the biggest things I'll point out in a second about the supposed GMO mosquito effort to do the same thing backfired, or, backfired, where it ended up increasing the population. Just like the GMO food experiment increased food insecurity. But then we let them run out the GMO vaccine game with Bill Gates involved too. They just fail and fail and fail right into success, apparently, or just gaining from it. The point here is that we've seen this before, where because of either accidents or deliberate manipulation, that the actual what they did actually increase the problem, which then ramps up their efforts to spray, which then causes more die-off. So then it's like this circle of manipulation, which causes us to get more sick. So my point is, if we've seen that before, we should wonder whether this same process is even going to be successful. It says they mate with females in the wild, and the eggs laid by the females aren't fertilized and don't hatch. They are fewer larvae. Over time, the fly population dies out. But, if that was the case, then how, it just feels like the logic around how this works has tried and failed many times in different fields in the past. The USDA expects a new screwworm fly factory to be up and running in southern Mexico by July 2026. The USDA in Mexico. That seems interesting to me. At the very least, what's her name? Claudenbaum, I forget her last name, the president of Mexico, has been calling out stuff in the U.S. government for a while and pushed back on the GMO corn thing that Derek and I talked about, what to try to force on her. And yet, nonetheless, they allow the USDA to just build factories in the middle of Mexico. Question everything, especially whether or not there's more coordination amongst these things than we realize. It plans to open a fly distribution center in southern Texas also by the end of the year, so that it can distribute flies from Panama if necessary. Now, does Texas get a say in this? Do the people of Texas get to say, I don't want you releasing 1 billion flies over our family? Probably not. Now it says threats to the beef industry. 1,000-pound bovine can be dead from within 2 weeks. And Michael Bailey, the president-elect of the American Veterinary Medicine Association, said, veterinarians have effective treatments for infested animals, but an infestation can still be unpleasant and cripple the animal with pain. Oh, okay, so they don't have any side effect. I mean, the way that reads is it's a painful thing that they can recover from that doesn't cripple them. It cripples them with pain. So we're releasing 1 billion flies to stop something that can be treated already. It doesn't end up hurting the animal. I mean, that seems like an interesting thing, right? Like, obviously this is a gross thing, and that if you don't catch it in time, clearly they can die within weeks. But if you're watching your animals and you have a way to treat them, I don't get the logic of playing God with a bunch of GMO flies. And it just feels like a rationale to do something they probably already want to mess with. Just my personal opinion. The numbers need to be large enough that females in the wild can't help but hook up with the sterile females for mating. Seems like an assumption, quite frankly. Alarmed about the flies, or I guess more so a hope. Alarmed about the flies' migration north, the U.S. temporarily closed its southern border in May to import live cattle, horses, and bison. I knew I read it wrong because I read it earlier. Are alarmed about the flies' migration north, the U.S. temporarily closed its southern border in May to imports. So they closed the imports of cattle, horses, and bison, because they're worried, arguably, that it'll come through on that, and it won't be fully open again until mid-September. I just find it interesting that it overlaps with closing the border. Just pointing out what I see. But female flies can lay their eggs in wounds on any warm-blooded animal, and that includes humans. Interesting. Gross. Another point to make, though, about this part is, I get the sense with the mosquito point, too, that there's more than just, mistakes, or that it's possible that these things can sense the difference or avoid, I wonder whether or not there's a point at which they end up avoiding the different version of these things that are in their community, and that's why it doesn't work. Because again, I'll show you in a second, these past examples of the mosquitoes have failed. Raising hundreds of millions of flies. Yuck. Dropping flies from the air can be dangerous. That's what it says. Risks associated, right? Okay. Dropping flies from the air can get you sick, can infest your animals, can cause all sorts of diseases. No. It can be dangerous because a plane can crash. That's actually what it says. And trust me, there's no other argument about any kind of other health overlaps. It can be dangerous because last month a plane crashed while they were dumping them on people. I just thought that was funny. So no mention of what the possible overlaps can be. So let me show you what I see in this. First of all, I just looked this up, and this is one of the ones that stood out to me. It's called Flies and Disease. This is part 2, in fact. It says involvement in the transmission of disease agents, which is the point that we're going to get into, and I'll show you the points in this book. It says the exhaustive evaluation of fly involvement is discussing what the book does. In the exhaustive evaluation of fly involvement in more than 60 human and animal diseases is drawn against a backdrop that gives careful balance to other modes of dissemination. So here's what this is the actual downloaded document, which you can read for yourself. Took me a second to find it. Mainly points out that chapter 3 and 4 are what relates to the disease, and you can read it for yourself. I just want to include those for you. Here is one of the points I wanted to show you. It just simply, and you can read through this, it's fascinating, actually. It says, in the vast majority of more than 60 diseases presented within this article, the evidence for fly involvement is unmistakable. So I just want to make it very clear that the science shows that flies lead to disease, among other things, right? That's important. So I just want to lay that out there as we're potentially dumping 1 billion flies over people in Texas, very hot, right? Which is it's just perfectly ripe for disease and, whatever else kind of, for coming from a food side of the thing, the moisture, temperature, plenty of, those are the things that add perfect, can create perfect, conditions for the growth of bacteria, pathogens. So here is a study from BMC Public Health, a systematic review of human pathogens carried by the housefly. Now, the housefly is a specific fly, but the general point about that book we showed you and other discussions are about flies in general. It's more so about the landing on things and carrying it around, as I understand it. But the specific flies have different aspects that cause more or less, but it's really about that overlap. Here's and this is the point I want to connect it with. Just thinking about this discussion, right? Not necessarily vaccinating, but the idea of how they use animals. Ticks, for example, which I should have grabbed that to start. It's actually a good overlap. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. This TrueStream Media, which, by the way, it looks like they're working on a new documentary for next year, which you check out. The officially ignored connection between Lyme disease and Plum Island. Watch this video and you will walk away. I mean, the evidence is shockingly clear. In fact, to the point to where they even shut down the area because of their experiment. The point is the U.S. government weaponized ticks to spread disease as a bioweapon on Plum Island, right across from New York. And they basically shut it down. There's signs everywhere. Don't come in here. Ticks everywhere. It's just this is what they've done over the years. You can prove this stuff. So thinking about that, wonder whether or not there's more going on here. Now, we already saw this. This is just one of an endless amount of articles well before this and after. This was 2010. Researchers turned mosquitoes into flying vaccinators. It's not a joke. It's legitimately what they did. And everything else as well, which is, I think, this article here. And this is also from a peer-reviewed study. It's science you can read for yourself. And it's not me making the title. It's exactly what it was reporting, that a deployable mosquito technology, like the GMO one we just pointed to, can execute, incapacitate, or vaccinate. Meaning that it can deploy something that could kill you, deploy something that could just casually put you to sleep, or vaccinate you. Now, this overlaps with James Giordano and his information about, the way they can deploy these nano, insect-laden dynamics. And he's talked about this a lot. All very clear. So the question becomes, why would we allow them to keep just dumping these things over us for whatever reason, right? With not just this, but just health in general. But then on top of that, what else might be going on? Or I should even include, by the way, all these things popped in my mind. Is that the same one? Oh, yeah, okay, there it is. The idea of compulsory moral bioenhancement should be covert. The simple point is they argue that if they deem it to be in the interest of humanity, then if it's something that they deem as necessary, that they shouldn't inform you of it, they should just do it first. And they argue that that complies with morality and ethics more because it's helping the world and, not even considering whether they could just be wrong and ignoring informed consent and all that. The point is, this is not one of many times that the U.S. government has put forward the idea, and this was 2018. They discussed this around COVID as well. The idea is that maybe we should just do it secretly because they don't know any better. That's how they see you. So all of this plays into the larger point of whether or not these things should continue to happen. And I wanted to include some things as we wrap this segment, just before we get into the rest of it, that I've talked about in the past. This is why I mentioned the edible rabies vaccine point. We talked about this on a show right here. Edible, transmissible, live rabies jabs, airdropped over. I didn't want to call them vaccines, but it's also not a jab. It's a little packet airdropped over the U.S. that include tetracycline. Tetracycline was what was the responsible factor, which I include right here. Or it's right here. Oh, there it is. Tetracycline was the reason that these GMO mosquitoes weren't working. It's right here. It shows that it was highlighted by a difference in results seen between a laboratory and a collaborator. They were getting 15% survival of the transgenic line. The mosquitoes that were supposed to be dying off were surviving 15% of the time. And then then those mated with females, they became resistant to whatever they were doing. And the point was that it had tetracycline in the traps they were using, which caused them to continue to be able to become resistant. And they, as far as I could tell, that hasn't stopped. Maybe it has, but my last time I looked into this, they were still doing it, which was baffling me. And that was the follow-up, was that these rabies vaccines they were dropping had tetracycline in them. And so you have this in the wild where then the point is this seems like a coordinated dynamic. But this discussion is about how they're dropping things like this, how they're using mosquitoes for all sorts of dynamics. And this was just a video I commented on, U.S. patent, whatever it is, involuntary immunization on non-lethal toxins like calming agents. And I just simply posted this out and said, this is a very real patent. But it's important to point out that there is no provable connection to the government nor to Bill Gates. But I covered this in depth on September 10th and highlighted below. And this the video I did about this. Here's the patent itself. Toxic mosquito aerial release system. This is stuff you can easily prove. That's a patent that very well overlaps with the concern of how it might be used for, bioweapon kind of stuff. I'll include those shows we talked about. This one as well. Obligatory pesticide spraying in New York City, GMO mosquitoes and flying vaccinators. Are they all connected? Sure seems that way. That's why I include this. And I simply said, are you aware that the GM mosquitoes released in California and Florida, which by the way, I believe are still happening. It says right there, experimental use permit for the main one, the OX5034, how do you say it again? Aedes aegypti in Florida and California has been renewed. That's the point. They renewed their experimental permit to dump mosquitoes over you that are GMO mosquitoes. So you're being experimented on. There's really no way around it, guys, and that seems to still be the case. I simply said, were you aware that those mosquitoes were released in California and Florida and everywhere else are an ongoing experiment? Are you okay with that? Considering that these are provable, there is provable DNA contamination and that between 3 to 15% do not die but get stronger, all backed up by exactly what we can see here. Study on DNA spread by genetically modified mosquitoes prompts backlash. That's from science.com. There we are. And I'll include the one I showed you earlier. Donald Trump rolls out his AI biomedical control grid. That's Stargate. And we'll go on to the next segment. But yeah, that's something very weird about all that. And it really worries me that we're playing it fast and loose with, just these people do not seem to care about the consequences of your life. But talking about the overlap to this with AI, which was the ending point, the reality that this is all, whether it's health and mRNA injections or everyone else, it seems like AI is just the panacea for this. Everything they want to do is AI direction, which is kind of like we always find with COVID and anything else. The thing they want to use to solve the current problem seems to always be the same solution despite the problem, which means they're either manufacturing problems to meet that solution or applying that solution to anything they come across, whether or not it actually solves the problem. But on the AI point of technocracy, just a thought points out, and I just want to include this in some points really quickly, because we've talked about this quite a lot. She goes, and guess what? It's not new, and it's being used constantly and without your consent to use Wi-Fi or your Echo devices and whatever else to detect motion in your home. And that's not even the half of it. We've already talked about this. We've covered this in World Economic Forum discussions, I think it was a DARPA related symposium where they'll point blank tell you that they can use your Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi signal to 3D map your entire room. And now it's just starting to slowly come out. Hey, guess what? Pay $9.99 and we'll detect motion in your house. Well, how do you think they can do that? You didn't upload anything new. You don't have a new device. They're just telling you they can do that. We need to start paying attention to where this is and get these things the hell out of your house. Now, this one I thought was fascinating. Just in a general direction of where this goes, and because you can't miss the obvious overlap to what this is. Here's the actual article. It's called, this is from hackster.io from yesterday. It's Empower Yourself is the title. And it says, with power on touch, you never need to replace a battery again because it turns you into a wireless power source. I mean, is this not the stuff of dystopian nightmares that we've talked about? Not just from the Matrix guys, like the idea that you become the power source for some kind of technocratic infrastructure. I mean, it's like every single thing we've been worrying about, to be clear, seems to be beginning to happen. It's crazy. Wearable power transmitter. Yeah, wearables. Isn't that what RFK Jr. just really told you was the future? Well, I simply said the same thing. With power on touch, you never need to replace a battery again because it turns you into the power. And I simply showed the Matrix thing coming out. And this person just points out his old comment where it says, this is not commonly known that your sweat glands can act as helical antennas. Wearables will be implanted, but won't be necessary. And this is just an interesting study. DNA, fractal antenna, and electromagnetic fields. Interesting, isn't it? Clearly, there's more going on, or it can be. And I think this is what they see. Now, an overlap to that, as Centroceptor also pointed out, who else caught during that interview we're pointing to that Tucker Carlson has partnered with Casey Means' company, Levels? Well, Levels, if you look into it, is all about wearables, primarily glucose tracking, but it's about wearables. That's the whole point of it. And RFK just told us that was the plan. Levels raised $12 million in seed funding from Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, one of the many in this kind of oligarchical circle that seems to be running the country right now, as well as Mark Randolph, co-founder and first CEO of Netflix, Dick Costolo, former CEO of Twitter, and Michael Arrington, founder of TechCrunch. Interesting. So to me, my point is simply that I find it interesting that this is not some outside the norm, outside the mainstream entity. You're tapped in right to the main point. Doesn't mean he's dishonest. Doesn't mean he's lying to you. You can decide that for yourself. I just think that's interesting. And I think that is when you see Andreessen come into play, start noticing the interconnected lines. Now, as always, that doesn't prove anything other than the connection. But it's something to note in regard to the question of whether or not there's a network that these people pretending to be these new independent things that are really just an abstract variation, a deviation from the norm, which we saw a lot, guys. We've seen a lot of these, Megyn Kelly, and it all happened around a weird similar time when they were losing control, and there still are, by the way. But you can see it right there. Brought to you by Levels. I find that personally interesting. Now, we've also talked about Detachment 201. Just one more example of technocracy in uniform, where you had Meta, OpenAI, and Palantir have their chief technical officers and another end up becoming, which they already did, lieutenant colonels in the military. I mean, if we're not recognizing where this is going by now, I don't think you're paying attention. I don't think you want to see this. This is happening rapidly right in front of us. Technocracy, the technocratic Zionist coup of this country. Now, don't forget Trump's mega bill dramatically expands biometric surveillance pretty much all over the country if you understand the way they break down the travel routes and everything else involved, and arguably will be the case anyway based on whatever next thing happens. And that's not even about the AI moratorium, which was, at least last time I checked, removed. It's about exactly what it looks like, almost as if that was the head fake, and this is what's actually happening. Taylor Hudak points out what Steve said about what Greg Reese posted, which is the Federal Reserve Bank has served its purpose and is no longer needed. Crypto AI world is here now, and the Fed is obsolete. Now, he's saying this because we're seeing a lot of discussion right now about the Fed and whether or not it's even the point is that the independent media has been calling out the concerns, the lie that is the Fed. Not a government. It's not the federal government. It's anything. It's an independent institution that's it's a manipulative force. And the point is that we've all known that this was coming to a head at some point. And because they see us pointing this out, and most people are starting to call it out, well, like everything else we're seeing during this administration, and it's not him or anybody, it's the government during this administration that is now finding a justification to roll out the new thing. But what they want you to think first is we're doing what you always asked for. getting rid of the Fed, shutting down everything. Even if who knows if it happens, like shutting down the IRS, all the claims they make. But should it begin, Greg Reese already sees the obvious, that they are building right behind it a worse system. That's the point. And Wake Up says that this, Steve Poikonen, this, I think, is why, and the Fed is trending lately, the bait and switch administration marches on, right? They want you to think this is what's about to happen. So you think you're getting what you want. Now, let's also point out the leaked whole of government AI plan that is provable. After the update, it is actually still provable based on where the U.S. government just shifted over these files, not thinking they're hiding it from everybody, but all they did was move it to another side where they were able to find it. And I went over this entirely in my show. The impending future of AI government, but who controls the AI? The point here is that this is a a U.S. government plan, but now with Trump's administration, to turn the entire government into an AI dynamic. And I mean, can't we not see? They're telling you this now. You can see it. But this was planned long before, and they didn't tell you that. They didn't run on their campaign on this, did they? Jason Bassler, just summing up this segment, says, you were promised spending cuts, and you got the bill, which, by the way, I really don't understand. It's like we're always being tested. Why in the world are we actually all continuing to say big, beautiful bill? It confounds me. Not only is it ridiculous, it's long and necessary. Like, we can call it the name of whatever the bill actually is. We can call it Trump's bill. We can call it the big bill. But the fact that, I mean, he's using it there to make sure you know what he's talking about. But the idea that this in corporate media, even people that are like, we hate Trump or the big, beautiful bill, like you're saying it's a big, beautiful bill. It just seems so silly to me that we are so easy to train. But the point is, you were promised spending cuts. And no, you got this gigantic monstrosity that everyone is now finally realizing was a problem. You were promised a ban on CBDCs. You got stable coins in the Genius Act, which we were telling you, right? It was going to be a stable coin version. And that's the example of bait and switch. No CBDCs, but they were planning the private coin version, which is far, far worse. You were promised the end of the deep state, but you got Palantir database. It's not a revolution. It's a technocratic rebrand. Exactly. Now let's talk about the two-party illusion that effectively, for some people, keeps that obvious albatross hidden from everybody. And this is just entertaining, funny, but important at the same time to show that these million follower accounts are influencing a ton of people. Now, this person and a few we're going to show are just a special case of their own, even amongst the lying mainstream alternative media. But he says, do I have to be the one that says it? There's not one person in the middle class. What does this say? I haven't read that yet. There's not one person in the middle class who cares about going to Mars, even though, he supported it. They just want to provide for their family and give them the best life here possible here on planet Earth. Tax cuts are a miracle to the middle class, making a life just, blah, 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 blah. There's never going to be a colony on Mars. It's a gigantic waste of money. If it ever actually happened, it would be 4 or 5 of the richest people on Earth. So tired of this nonsense. Oh, okay, that's funny. So I love that that's there now. That wasn't there earlier. And here's why. Or here's why I am going to point this out. Because this account, which I'm really enjoying lately, this is called This You. Here's what he said. And from May 26th of this year, no less. I want to go to Mars. It's just, you can't, like, that's priceless. So, I mean, couldn't you go back and delete that? Is he not even, here's what I think is actually possibly the case, that he's not even aware that he's that easy to control, that maybe he thinks both those things in each moment. And that's silly. Now, yes, people can evolve their opinions, but realize it's not about that he's evolved. These people will say, as we keep seeing, which is why he's a victim of this, whatever Trump says tomorrow or today is what he swears was always the case. And if Trump says the next thing the next day, that's what he says was always the case. We all see this. And here's a good example of that. I think it's funny. So, nobody wants this. And he literally says, I want to go to Mars in May. It's just so stupid. You got to laugh at this stuff. And I simply said, but when Musk becomes Trump's friend again, suddenly it will all make sense. And it always did, right? Here is Nick Sorter. Same point. Says that we talked about this in yesterday's show. The Trump DOJ has begun prioritizing stripping American citizens, naturalized, yes, still American citizens, of their citizenship. And we've already seen cases that it's becoming flimsy at best. We'll go over some more in a second. My point is, He says, Democrats handed out this, whatever the narrative is. Yay, strip them. Okay, so you don't like the Constitution anymore? Are you just that stupid? It's so frustrating to see these people that will just jump into whatever was said today, despite how it literally contradicts what they claim they believe in 30 seconds ago. So I said this, which is the kind of the point of what we're seeing across the board. Trump, like it's basically like a back and forth between Trump and Nick. I showed it yesterday. But Trump says, today I am announcing something. And it will be better than everything ever created before, or whatever, is hyperbolic. Nick says, hooray for something. Something is exactly what we voted for. Something is America first. If you don't blindly cheer for something, you hate America. Trump the next day. Something was never a good idea, as I've always said. Nick's sorter 30 seconds later. Only Democrats support something, and Trump fighting something is exactly what we voted for. Repeat, rinse and repeat. And guys, we all know that this is going on in a lot of people's feet. Like it's shockingly embarrassing. And that's what we're seeing right now. Here's an example of the same account pointing out Gunther Eagleman, same category. He says, if gas hits $10 to $12 a gallon, I still won't buy an electric car. I'm that guy. My new Model S Plaid is home. Thank you, Tesla, Elon Musk, for making a badass car. The acceleration in this thing is wild. Now, yeah, again, maybe he changed his mind. That is okay. My point is about the people that will serve. Like, my point is most of these people are suddenly now going, those are bad again, because Trump just said that yesterday. And Elon Musk has always been a bad guy, even though they were just pandering to him every moment because Trump told him to. It's everywhere you look, guys. You know it. Another example we showed you before was when Trump came out the first time and said, or basically allows restaurants, hotels, and illegal immigrants to continue to do so because, well, we can't ruin their farms. But what was funny is right before he said that, DC Drano came out and said, time to start arresting CEOs who knowingly hire illegal aliens. Okay. The next day, Trump goes, well, we're going to allow them, legal aliens, in farms and restaurants, that he owns farms, restaurants, and hotels. And I simply said, breaking, DC Drano calls for the arrest of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, because both of them use them in plenty of examples, and he's making that okay. I said, or should we assume he didn't mean all CEOs? Hypocrisy, guys. It's everywhere you look right now. Now, Slow News Day makes the point. How you get rich in independent media, in quotes, mainstream alternative, never have an original thought. Live or die according to what's trending. Never look below the surface. Steal the work, opinions of shadow banned media. Always, always, always wait till it's safe to talk about anything real. It's exactly what happens. Now, there's also examples of politicians. Here's Zionist Miller. President Trump is delivering on every single promise he campaigned on. Go back and watch the rally speeches. Every promise, every day, one after another. Honor the mandate. That's basically him telling you to toe the line. Do what you're told because the mandate. Enact the agenda. Tony Montana says Epstein files, JFK files, 9/11 files, or I could add ending the IRS, ending the Fed, ending all these different things. Things can concern the American public. Things that concern the American public are still classified. And the point is this is not true. And to be real, as you all know, a ton of Republicans, even those that were very, very hardcore Trump, are starting to call it out. Here is Lisa Christine, who's a supporter. She says, are there no mass deportations, no arrests, no Epstein files, no wall built, no shutdown of the Department of Education, CIA, FBI? Stop lying to us. See, Miller is just trying to keep you invested in this Zionist overtaking of our country, as far as I can tell. She also points out another broken promise. Trump is not delivering on his pledge of no tax on Social Security. This has been replaced with a temporary 3-year deduction. The narrative shifts and they go, that's what we always wanted, because the Eagleman, Cat Turds, and Johnsons out there will just claim that's what you always wanted and make you know that that's what you wanted. That's what you asked for, even though that's not what you asked for. They're telling you. They speak on behalf of the nation, apparently. They don't. Like, that's hubris. Or propaganda. This person says, I voted for Trump. The only thing Trump has done is close the border. And he hasn't even done that, to be quite honest. Everything else has been a total half lie and half lie. Thomas Massey for president, he says. Interesting. Now, here is Robin Field saying, you mean like not funding Planned Parenthood? You mean like no Medicaid for illegals? You mean like not funding sex changes? All of these are still in the bill. What people are choosing to ignore. It says it's not beautiful. It's an average increase of $560 a year for the lowest 20% income and a tax saving of the top 10%. Tell me again how you want to take care of seniors when you are taxing retirees and those having to subsidize their Social Security the most. Criticism. The point is, so many people have their criticisms of what is going on, and they just want to come up and go, preach the narrative that their sycophants will cheer for. And that's all this is right now. I mean, there's plenty of other things to get into around a lot of this, plenty of other things that haven't come to pass. You all know, we've talked about them relentlessly. And this is another example. And here, this same account, he has like 75 of these, by the way. And it just shows you this is what politics is. And now by extension, the blindly team sport politics partisans. Brian Steele says this is back in February 2nd, 2022. The United States has now hit $30 trillion in debt. That's over $90,000 per American. We need to stop the uncontrolled spending from Washington. July 1st, 2025. Off to D.C. to deliver the OBBB for, bill, big, beautiful bill for President Trump's signature. So many of them have said, we can't keep spending. And then today go, yay, bill. They don't care. Now, talking about Trump, which clearly is the factor for why a lot of these people are, lost in all of this or are choosing to take a side. Just a thought put this out. I do think this is very relevant. And before we kind of point to the Butler thing as well. She says the Trump psyop is so multi-layered and undeniably genius. The establishment has successfully conditioned both parties to focus on Trump for all the wrong reasons. He's not Hitler, like Democrats think. He's not a savior, like Republicans think. He's a very convincing, consuming, and charismatic actor who will absolutely be selected this election. Now, this was November 5th, 2024. Where I lose my place. There we go. So he can continue to distract supporters of both parties. Now, we talked with her before this. We share the similar opinion. We could be doing jumping jacks and backflips and saying, well, I called it, like some people do. The point is, we very clearly, many more than once, said that Trump was going to be the person put in that place, which is my opinion. I didn't know that for fact. But the point is, I think there's obvious reasons to see why that was coming. And it says, meanwhile, the technocrats and global cabal who fund them will move forward with implementing all of the policies we've been successfully distracted from. Is that not what's happening? She said this in November 2024. Meanwhile, or that's the part I read, they will, and the Fed, replace with CBDC, or at this point, a stable coin, same direction. They will control the border with biometric surveillance. They will implement a voter ID that will become your digital ID. They will present everything app that will manage your social credit score. All these things are still building, guys, all of them going in the same direction. This won't happen overnight, but it will happen unless we stop the madness now. We are consumed by a scripted reality TV show. It might be entertaining, but continuing to be distracted by it will only solidify our digital prison. Make no mistake, the technocratic Pied Piper is Trump and Elon, in my opinion, and Americans of all political leanings are following his tune down the river. Decensored News points out he's literally a WWE Hall of Famer, which doesn't necessarily prove he's lying in either context, but it's just worth considering. Maybe even thinking about the fight, right? I mean, we've seen this kind of thing before. We've seen Trump playing the role, acting, his different TV shows, worth considering. Now, Slow News Day put this out, and I genuinely think this is worth, just reflecting on. Sal the Agris just put this out with a thinking face, and it simply shows July 2018 and May 2025. Now, again, guys, the point of this. Now, look, and just to be clear, there's people in the chat that are kind of like coping with this and going, that's a fake one down there on the bottom, or he got plastic surgery, or, anything's certainly possible, guys. But as we already showed you before, you could take pictures from any number of places. And I did this myself with live shots from different times of videos of Trump. And it's the same exact thing. I don't know how we can make sense of this without realizing we were manipulated in some way, which we all seem to think with that whole event, especially now that they just kind of put it to bed and said one shooter, and the Republicans didn't call that out. I mean, none of you thought that, but seemingly the leaders of your mainstream alternative media movement, I guess, just quieted everybody because we didn't want to be we don't counter signal the leader. But guys, remember when they said that this little dribble there was like where the bullet? No, that was the same before he was shot. It's the same thing now. I just think it's a special kind of ignorance to not acknowledge that something happened. I was thinking about this today, and I just was like, I can't even make sense of how that would, unless it was just thoroughly, entirely manufactured, which I'm not going to say. I can't prove that. How it would make sense that if he wasn't, how all of that would have happened the way it did. I just think it's very, very, very strange. And I said this at the time. I mean, the point is, in the midst of like an immediate, event, and everyone's very charged up and emotional. It's, and it's, as I've always pointed out, it's more important in that moment than ever to be overly objective, to make sure that we're not jumping to conclusions. But as I said at the time, it's very clear that there was something going on. And I was as far as I know, one of the very first people to point out this. Remember, this is the scene. I'm including some shows we did on this, where you can easily see from where he was on the roof, especially with what you can see from these pictures, by the way. Here's an actual video where they're coming up on the roof and finding him. Look how far in that is. If you remember all this, how far they would have been in right there, claiming that you were somehow able to see him on that roof from all the way over here down. And remember, you have videos of them standing alongside that building, which was high enough to where you couldn't just look over the top. And on top of that, that where he was standing on the stage, from where that shot is literally, and you can look at the timing, and when he looked to, they said he looked to the screen, that's when it happened. His ear was covered from that side when that took place. That's a fact. I easily proved that, and plenty of other honest people pointed it out too. That's not to say that I knew what made sense of it all, but that was obvious. And I just included this Derek's article from the time. This is from July 2024. It was called "We Must Question the Attempted Assassination of Trump." Now, if you read the article, he's not claiming he knows either. But the point is, even if there is nothing, that we should question everything. That's just logical. Of course we should question what happened. That was his whole point. There's no reason we shouldn't question this like we question everything else. And then went through the reasons that we are skeptical. Very important. Now, there's all these comments you can read for yourself. It is funny, people acting like this is, manipulated or it's plastic surgery. Yeah, again, consider those things, but are you speaking from intelligence? Do you know that? Did he claim that? Not that I know of. Seems strange. Remember the little patch on his ear? They all wore it at the event. Just the whole thing screams manipulation. You can decide why or how. This is Freddie Pontone put this out of the video. And every moment we got more information, every time something stood out as an anomaly. Every time. We went over it just like everybody else. Here was the show at the time of July 26th. More inconsistency in the Trump shooting narrative. This one was evidence mounts showing official story on Trump shooting is false. And of course, even then, July 18, 2024, cancel culture from the right. Funny how these things bubble up in other circles. And, we were saying years ago, the point is that it's not just my show. It's a lot of people in this field like Steve and people in the IMA that are doing this consistently, long-term, and banging this stuff out, making their assessments. And then it's the ones we're pointing to that tend to, as Steve said, steal from shadow ban. We'll scoop these things up and point them out at moments when it's already just about to bubble over in order to go, I made that claim, even though, it's constant this is happening. But, maybe I'm wrong too. Question everything, rely on the facts and what you can prove. Now, Elon Musk, a very interesting deal. We're going to get into his kind of weird, as I point in the chat, the suspect division. This was from yesterday. Elon Musk now expresses regret for wild CPAC chainsaw display. It lacked empathy. Even this says, amid the renewed feud between Trump and Elon, the one-time first buddy, the world's richest man is now expressing some contrition over his wild antics at the year's CPAC conference, which saw him wielding a giant chainsaw with the president's signature. The point is, I don't know. I think if this is real, then he's trying to win people over, in my opinion, because I think he absolutely doesn't care that he did that. That's my opinion. But if it's not genuine, to me, this is trying to win over the same reason, but from a different angle, trying to win over the people that loved him before he was joining the right, before he was on Trump's side. To say, I was wrong. Everyone loves a redemption story, right? I made mistakes. Take me back on the left and let me, that's what it feels like. Another, or rather your new party, which is something we've always been predicting that, it's inevitable. It's not just that we see it coming. It's that it will eventually happen, which is a new party to try to reimagine, reinvent, reinvigorate the two-party illusion, the three-party illusion, which is, it's the same point. False binary is what, which is two things. The point is the same concept. As I think we can argue, and many people do, is the same thing that the UK deals with, even though there's more than two. Now, also, before we get into their points, let's not forget how Doge wrapped up. It's a very weird thing that they argue is still, I guess, happening, but we're not hearing about it. We're not seeing any new actions. I think it actually kind of just petered out. But what I thought was fascinating, and I didn't really talk about this back on June 8th, according to NPR, a Doge employee has said, quote, I personally was pretty surprised, actually, at how efficient the government was. Now, there's a reason you didn't hear this or why people didn't report on it from the side that has been screaming about how everything is only one-sided, Democrat, fraudulent. The point is he's claiming that it turns out there really wasn't that much fraud. Fraud was minimal, he said, and abuse was, quote, relatively non-existent. Now, that's not true. Not because Elon said so, but because you can literally prove that's not true from both sides. But what's weird is right after Elon sort of exits stage left, the Doge employee turns around and goes, hey, everything's good to go. That felt very contrived and very strange to me. And I think it's building to what we're seeing now is sort of like a wrap up and moving on. And then also, that we, I guess, fixed everything, not really, no one's going to buy that, but that'll become sort of the narrative. Like we did our job. Doge did it. It's over, right? That is all we beat Iran. Didn't Trump and Netanyahu both claim they won something? It's clearly not, but that's how they desperately try to control the narrative. This is interesting as well. Post Duopolis says, anyone else remember when Elon Musk implied there was an incriminating evidence about Trump and the Epstein files? And then Trump threatened Elon's government contracts? Good times. I mean, how do we possibly not consider, it's funny how that is such a major thing. So either he knows Trump's on the files and he used that to threaten him because they were fighting, or or there's three, or he was actually fighting still and he lied about that to get him back, which just shows you who they are. And I think that's probably the most likely. Not that I know the point is there's clear evidence Trump's involved in all that, but maybe Elon didn't know that for sure and just lied about it to try, or didn't know and said it anyway to try to pressure him. My point is I genuinely think that's who these people are, how petty they are. And I'm going to show you a clip from Trump next where he's threatening Elon in reverse in the same way, showing you that these things are not sacred, that they're abusing their tools and probably have never had any real, what's the right word? Not had a standing to do what they've been doing with this, that they've been lying to you. My point, though, is that Epstein, or I guess the third option was ultimately that they created all this to get the illusion they were divided. But I mean, my point was how in the world you would allow the floated idea of being in the Epstein files. Maybe that's what Israel wanted. I don't know. Worth considering, though. And now Decentralized News put this argument forward as well. Said this whole feud between Musk and Trump, in part, is it just a setup so that that fiscal hawk Musk can help found some controlled opposition third party, which is something, again, I said a second ago is really, how hasn't that happened yet? I mean, there's other parties, but I mean like a legitimate roll up. That's what I thought MAGA and the Rhino, I thought that's what it was going to become. Not just a weird split off, but an actual, official with an RNC for the new party kind of a thing, a DNC for the new party and a different dynamic tapped into the same broken system. But it says, or take one over and rebrand it like he did with the free speech platform, Twitter, because it seems like the same basic playbook. Now we'll go over these tweets. Here's the one where he said, is it time to create a new political party? And out of 5 million votes, 80% said yes. Now, if you only give them yes and no, I think the answer, yes, there should be more. But if you included more options, I'm willing to bet you most of those 80%, in my opinion, would probably argue if you shut down the government entirely, they'd say yes. Or to remove both parties, they say yes. I think that's where that actually comes from. Free speech is essential to a functioning democracy. Did you believe Twitter rigorously adheres to this principle? No. You got to love that. That's from March 25th, 2022. Now, he says, if this insane spending bill passes, spending bill, could you just call it that? The American Party will be formed the next day. That's interesting. The American Party, of course. Our country needs an alternative to the Democrat-Republican uniparty so that the people can actually have a voice. Oh, now you care about the uniparty. Weren't you the one continuing to claim that Democrats were the deep state? Guys, there's just no way to be honest about this without, or rather to not acknowledge this is a shockingly obvious contradiction to what was being pushed on everybody. So either he lied the entire time, which by the way is what I think. He was playing all of you. He was saying whatever you wanted to hear, whatever the lowest common denominator wanted to hear. Democrat, pedophile, deep state, Muslim, terrorist, whatever the things they're putting out. Which in some cases, yes, there are nuggets of truth to all of these things, but the reality is trying to create it as a one-sided point. And now he says the uniparty. So how can there be a uniparty if the Democrats are the deep state? Let me break this down for me, Elon Musk. So that's one reason why I feel like this feels contrived. Now realize that my point is, I still do think that he was saying whatever they wanted to say just to lie to you. That both can exist. And now the plan is to break off and make you think they're fighting. I just, how do you reconcile that? Either, again, he is a dishonest person who will say whatever he needs to say, which is true in any case, I think, or addition. I just lost my train of thought there, but the bottom, I said it 3 times over. I'm just trying to make it clear for people. The bottom line is that this is a dishonest statement that contradicts what he said before. And he says, every member of Congress on the 30th who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for this bill, the biggest debt increase in history, should hang their heads in shame. And this part is interesting, which they're going to mention next. He says, and they will lose their primary next year if it is the last thing I do on this earth. It's a gigantic statement. Maybe he doesn't mean it at all. We'll find out next year, I guess, because the bill, I think, is clearly going to pass. Now, here is what he said yesterday. And I just think, guys, I'll comment on it afterward. It's only 18 seconds, but this is just, it's the same point with Elon Musk in that statement. You listen to this, and if you can't acknowledge that this shows you that this is frivolous, they're doing whatever they want to anyone they want, whenever they want, then you're being dishonest with yourself.
Ripping into this bill again. Are you concerned that Republicans are going to be swayed by Musk and his money?
No, I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is Doge is going to look at Musk. And if Doge looks at Musk, we're going to save a fortune. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't think you should be playing that game with me.
Yeah, so he threatened him, right? Whether he means it or not, which is certainly possible that he just, which is irresponsible, childish. Clearly his statement there, and there's one first part too.
Swayed by Musk and his money.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, yeah. So the question was, are you worried that his money will sway other politicians to go against his agenda?
I think what's going to happen is Doge is going to look at Musk. And if Doge looks at Musk, we're going to save a fortune.
Okay, so how do you make sense of that? How do you know that, Trump? So if you're going to save a fortune and Doge is about removing inefficiency and waste and fraud, did you just tell us that Elon's been fraudulently manipulating the American people the entire time and you were okay with that? Or are you making all of that up? Or are you going to use this Doge platform to dishonestly take money from somebody who doesn't deserve it? Any one of those, there's no other way to make sense of what he just said. I think we all know the reality of this. I think that we've seen lies about what they claim they're saving while they actually spend in the same ways in other contexts. I mean, it's all an illusion here, guys. It's the government playing games with the left-right illusion. But again, it's certainly also possible that they are feuding, but it makes the same point, doesn't it? That if they are feuding, it just makes it even more shockingly petty and not more, less devious, trying to trick you into thinking that and just showing you their children. But either way, if we do it, we'll save millions. So you're accusing him of fraud, or you're lying about it, or you're okay with that, or or you're using Doge as a manipulative tool. I mean, you can't miss this stuff, guys. Now here's High Impact Flicks makes the same kind of assessment, but from what Trump wrote. He put out, I think this was yesterday, it doesn't show the date. He says, Elon Musk knew long before he was strongly endorsing me for president that I was strongly against the EV mandate. It is ridiculous, even though clearly he was leaning into it when Elon was next to him, and was always a part of my campaign. Electric cars are fine, but not everyone should be forced to own one, which, who can disagree with that? And that's not really what they were pushing. The point is that that's what the sentiment is that everyone should agree with. It's choice, right? But that's what's put forward, like with the shots and the things. A lot of people from his side would argue they shouldn't exist at all. Not that I agree with that. My point is that seems to be a deviation from what most of his base thinks. Even that, let alone hawking Tesla people from the White House. But it says Elon may get some subsidy, get more subsidy than any human being in history. So even right there, he's showing you that that's dishonest. I mean, why is that okay? Why is that happening? Well, because he's part of the government. He is a government contractor who is building out the technocratic future. But it says, and by far, and without subsidies, Elon would probably have to close up shop and head back to South Africa. It says, no more rocket launches, satellites, electric car production, and our country would save a fortune. So are all those things frivolous? Is he lying about all those things? Aren't you the ones telling us all those things are super important? I mean, or are you just boxing him out because he said mean things about you? We have to be honest about this. I mean, this is what I mean about the lowest common denominator. There are people that will love this just because it's spicy, because he's yelling at him and look at Elon looks stupid. And I like when people fight, or just, I hated him all along, or I'm with Trump no matter what. Those are ignorant people. Those are people that don't, that only care about their emotional manipulation. Or I shouldn't even say that. Maybe they just don't care about the same things, which that's, each their own. But understand that they don't care about whether this is correct, whether it saves the country, whether this is the right thing for the people of this country. because obviously if it's more about the back and forth, then these things are secondary. But this shows you in every possible way that they don't, that this is about them, their personal agenda, their personal ego. And it says, perhaps we should have Doge take a hard look at this. Big money to be saved. Well, Brian, that was right there. Brian Heinpack Flick says, translation, I knew Elon was bad for America, but I pretended he wasn't and kept silent because I hate Americans. Now that he's said bad things about me in my big, beautiful bill, I'll pretend to save America from Elon the parasite. Exactly. Now here, again, the same Vox Populi, Vox Dei, it's the same thing we talked about before, technocratic direction. He says, is it time to create the new party? We just showed you this. 80%, at least, of his following. I mean, he's got, 221 million followers? So he's got 5 million engaged on that. Like, the point is that's, his supporters are going to agree with him largely. I think that's the case. But either way, it's a lot of people. That's a large part of the country. Again, assuming that's actually true. He could easily manipulate these things. I'm not saying I think that, that's obviously possible. And then, of course, this is a use Annex search account that's pointing out the interview with Yacarino and Mario Awful. And he says, I'm going to promote a third party, but I'm going to censor and shadow ban the people who would support me most. Just making fun of this. The idea that this platform has been nothing they promised, despite the screaming partisan narrative that they want you to think and the people that support that because they're on a side. The facts are obvious. He goes, I want to make X a one-stop shop platform, but I will kick anyone off who dares criticize Jewish crimes of Israel. What did the ex-CEO say? Twitter CEO? Twitter is giving away everyone's personal info to militaries and governments. Or working with the ADL, or, shadow banning, censoring for hate speech. Totally different world we're in. It is actually. It's just far, far worse. Now, same point here about this cat turd clown saying, I want to go to Mars. Let's talk Zora Ranch. Said, look who is pretending that they understand. Two-party illusion stuff. Again, Elon Musk says they just pretend to be two parties. It's just one uniparty in reality. Now, I really take a second and think on this. This guy either has literally no principle at all and just, yesterday was saying whatever he needed to say about the Democrats to get you to support him, and now is saying this because he wants to start a new party because he wants your support. Right, which is dishonest, or or at the end of the day, you lied the entire time, right? That you want, and now this is what you really believe, right? That you lied about the Democrat deep state, but now you've always believed in the uniparty because that's the truth, guys. But so everything's a fraud. How long did we say this when he was jumping on stage and dark MAGA and, spitting back things at you that he thought you wanted to hear that felt clumsy and forced and didn't really jive? It's clear that he is playing a role to me. How do we not see that now? How do you reconcile this with what they've been saying? Under the Rabbit Hole simply points out debt under Democrats, debt under Republicans. Gee, what a shock. It's like one linear progression of the agenda, like I've been saying, because it is, because this is no different. There are different people that believe they're on different sides, but at the end of the day, the government is the government, and they work together in every possible way that overlaps with controlling your life. Now, Clint Russell, there's plenty of people out there that are, choosing to, basically take Elon and Massey's side over Trump. Despite this entire time, even before the selection, largely pushing back on anybody that said this is, they're both a problem, and choosing one of the other is just the same problem. And we got called black-pilled and purity test and all that. But now choosing Elon's side. But I think it's interesting because I think this is what we're going to see. We're going to see people that decide to make what appears to be this principled stance to join one of these new sides, and it's just the extension of the same thing. So if I worried about the false paradigm then, it's the same point now. Jumping into the new party they create is the same trap. You'd think people could begin to see that, but I could be wrong, definitely. He says, I don't believe for a second that Elon would be publicly challenging Trump on spending, damaging his own companies and turning the MAGA base against himself, all because EV credits. Well, I think it's a lot more than EV credits, but I agree that it doesn't seem like it makes sense. But very petty people and, egotistical megalomania, yeah, that makes sense. But he says it's obvious he understands math and strongly believes that the spending levels will destroy us. Well, he wasn't really. There's plenty of points where he was holding back on statements like that or criticism that he'll now put out because he was with the team. So you have to consider whether he might now be saying things that challenge the team because he's no longer on the team. And I don't mean just the bill. I mean in every sense. But Also, that he's this as intelligent as he claims to be is questionable, to be honest. Greg Reese put out a really great breakdown of how most of his background and his work seems to be built on a bunch of lies. So it's worth considering that he's just a front man. It's obvious he understands, he goes on, math and strongly believes, I respect it a ton. A willingness to self-sacrifice for a cause bigger than yourself is very rare among billionaires. Oh, here we go again. So the emotional this is all personal emotional opinion. If we're working on facts and he just broke off from the team, maybe we should start questioning whether there's more going on here than his willingness to save the world from the people you just told us we're going to save the world. I have to choose between Elon, Massey, and Paul versus Trump and GOP swamp. Easiest call of my life. So now that the Trump swamp, didn't we just go through this? He says there's no political solution. Never mind the transhumanist fraud like Elon. This is Keith. He's got 12 kids, 11 are IVF babies, and like 9 or more are with the Jewish woman. Not that that necessarily matters to anybody, unless that you are assuming all Jewish people are the problem. He's a ketamine-addicted front man who is trying to soft push to AI takeover. This is his person's opinion, but he says Wef, Harari are the stick and Elon are the carrot. Now, point is also make sure we understand that Zionism very much does overlap with Jewish people, so it's worth considering that that's working through that. But just always want to point out that we shouldn't pretend that being Jewish is in and of itself a problem. It's not. There's Christian Zionism, Jewish Zionism. I believe that's the bigger issue. Think for yourself about it. But Greg Reese put this clip out down here I just mentioned. Elon Musk has always been a fraud and has all the appearances of the MK Ultra puppet. That's a good clip, and we played it before. Lies. Daniel McAdams comes out and says, who is the real MAGA? And asks about Donald Trump or Thomas Massey. 92% said Thomas Massey. That's 3,633 votes, but it's still the point. Now, this is what I thought was funny. D-Train says, yeah, the 2016 never Trumper coattail riders are the real MAGA. I thought it was important to make a point off of this. And I said, what I find funny is that it seems clear that you see this MAGA as a club, a group, a team to be removed from, as opposed to what it actually stands for, the principle behind it, make America great again. And in that light, this is obvious to anyone not blinded by team sport politics. The point being that whether you trust Massey or not, which we shouldn't trust any of them, his principled actions are shockingly, he's the most principled congressman that I personally think I've ever seen. And clearly, and again, I'm not going to support him. I don't support politicians, and I frankly expect to be manipulated over the years by these people, or either tricked or lied to, just because that's what history shows us. If he doesn't, I would love to see that. I hope for that. But I expect what we've always seen. That's just logical. The point, though, is that he is by far more in line with the principles of what their party, what their side said was going to be make America great again before this election. And so for them to say, oh yeah, those ones are the fake ones, well, then all you're doing is making it about the team and not about the principles of what you were told was going to happen, which Massey has held to. I think that's important to think about. Now, David Icke, I'll play this clip first, has a statement about Zionist Miller. Now, this is very interesting because Miller here accuses Elon Musk on live TV of supporting the invasion and called him an outside voice who doesn't represent the interest of the American people. Wow, how fast things can shift, huh, guys?
Oppose this bill is to support the invasion. To oppose this bill is to support the continued giveaways and freebies to cheaters and scam artists.
Of course, because literally every single person involved in any of these things are all liars, cheaters, rapists, and terrorists in MS-13, right? No. This guy's a liar. He's a deceiver. He's a deliberate. Everything he says is just like Trump. It's hyperbolic. Now, also note how this plastic-faced person next to him just goes along and never, the point is, as a journalist, you're not supposed to let people just rattle off absolutely provable lies or, hyperbolic statements that sweep up an entire group of people as one thing, even though it's not true. But that Fox and CNN and all the rest of these are propaganda platforms, and this is what they want you to hear.
Oppose this bill is to support a 68% tax hike on the American public, and is also to oppose this bill is to support a deprivation of all of the tax benefits that President Trump is fighting to deliver to the middle class.
Except I don't think anybody other than people that support their team are saying that. And a lot of Republicans who are knowledgeable and honest are going, that's simply not true.
Like no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. The Senate passed this bill just today, demonstrating that they are fighting for President Trump. They are fighting for his agenda. They are not going to listen to an outside voice that does not represent the interests of the American people.
Except they were, and you were, like 25 seconds ago, like literally telling us that he's going to save the country, all of you. And now he's like this pariah enemy that we should never trust. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of intelligence to recognize how confounding that is. Again, either they were lying then or they're lying now. Not hard to recognize.
Or the interests of the Republican Party, and the House is going to rally behind President Trump to pass this bill for America.
America! So, David Icke says, Israel's spokesman in the Trump administration, well, they all are, really, now trashing Musk without a mention of the $250 million to get Trump elected. When the cult leader turns on you, it doesn't matter what you've done for him. MAGA media, take note. All this is creating the very chaos that this crowd are in there to generate. Chaos means the status quo is demolished, and that's exactly the game, so a new AI status quo can replace it. Now, I mean, right now, you like if any, I don't care who it is. I mean, we saw it with Tucker Carlson, guys, that he comes out and says what you did with Iran was not America first, and it for at least a day, the entire movement was the ones that were, the teams for politics, hated him, screamed about him, called him damn, he was always a liar, cat turd, all the rest, all of these people. So my point is, any of you out there who think you are just a diehard Trump supporter, if you dared even momentarily, and let's just say you have like a large enough following to where it might reach his ear, deviate from what the standing point, what the narrative is, what the talking points are, and came out and said, I did think this is the opposite. Not only would your own audience eat you alive, audience capture, but you would then get attacked by the movement and possibly even get disowned by the Trump team because you said the opposite of what they claimed. Massey saw this. It didn't insult him. He just said, I don't think this is the right direction. He's not allowed to have his own opinion. It's just ideological control. It's very obvious. Now, I simply said, either it's all a ploy in regard to the same clip for the podcast, which means they're playing you, all of you, the ploy being the divide, attacking Musk, which means they're playing you, all of you, left and right, or this is how easy you're cast aside by Trump when you even once fail to toe the line, which means you were played to begin with. My point is, either way, these people are not fighting for you. Trump and Musk feud blows up again with yet again threats of Doge and deporting Elon Musk. I mean, this is just borderline cartoonish and comical, if not completely. To now even be flirting with the idea of deporting Musk, just the whole thing reeks of just absolute incompetence, or that we're being played into something very clearly. So talking about the deportation, we just discussed this yesterday, DOJ to prioritize revoking American citizenship. Now, I'm going to play this again because I really think people missed the point in this, that really, clearly the memo was meant to focus on denaturalization, about people that come here, get citizenship, and then they claim they can remove it. Now, I went through deeply yesterday, not to some degree, went through the background of that discussion, which shows you what you can get removed for if you are a naturalized citizen, meaning you moved here and got citizenship. And guys, it is what they're trying to do and the way they're setting this up, criticizing Israel, being against the Iran war included in the memo. That is not enough. Now, the only way they're trying to play that as enough is to claim that's the national security. The main thing, because it goes back to McCarthy era, which is not a good time for us to look to for what we're doing today. It goes back to the main two things were national security and communism, which, by the way, are exactly the two things they're trying to use right now to push this forward. And we're going to get to the Atlas point and why this is a lot bigger than just getting rid of some people they think are breaking the law. It's about them trying to find any reason to get rid of anybody that they don't like. It's as clear as day to me. And so if you look at all the information here and who's already been applied and who they're focusing on, it's obvious what's happening. And my point was, Trump, more than once, said that it is not just about naturalized citizens. In both statements, in both interviews, and all the one, they say very clearly naturalized and born in this country. And he says, yes, what do you think? They're special? That we should get people out of here that are breaking the law? Well, yeah, human beings all apply under the Constitution, which is the reality if you understand anything about the Constitution. And here we are today where they're showing you yet again that you're next.
You know, a little controversial, but I couldn't care less. We have a lot of bad criminals that came into this country, and they came in stupidly. It was an unforced error. It was an incompetent president that allowed it to happen. It was an auto pen maybe that allowed it to happen, and it did happen. But we also have a lot of bad people that have been, you know, a little controversial, but I couldn't care less. We have a lot of bad criminals that came into this country, and they came in stupidly. It was an unforced error. It was an incompetent president that allowed it to happen. It was an auto pen maybe that allowed it to happen, and it did happen. But we also have a lot of bad people that have been here for a long time. People that whack people over the head with a baseball bat from behind when they're not looking and kill them. People that knife you when you're walking down the street. They're not new to our country. They're old to our country. Many of them were born in our country. I think, you know, little.
Damn it, right there.
They're not new to our country. They're old to our country. Many of them were born in our country.
There you go. Born in the country. So, I mean, with whether a slip of the tongue or just a very quick statement to put it on the record, he's saying anybody, which, as I said, is probably the 6th time now he's floated the idea of removing Americans. I mean, whether you're talking about the idea of literally removing an American who remains a citizen to some foreign prison, or which I argue is the way it will go, is their effort to push it through to remove your citizenship and then deport you, which is what the whole thing seems to be about.
I think we ought to get them the hell out of here too. You want to know the truth. So maybe that'll be the next job that we'll work on together. But
with this Gulf of America hat that looks ridiculous. So here, I wasn't going to get into this the other show, and I'm still. My point is the reason I didn't want to around Zohran Mamdani. Is that how you say it? In New York, which recently won the primary. I don't want to support politicians just as a matter of policy for me. It's just a matter of practice because I don't believe. Like, for me, it's about the outcome, not the promises. And the only way you can support politicians these days is about promises, unless they've had a track record that you can lean into, like Massey, for example. But I still am at the point where everyone has been played too many times by this whole broken system. So my point was, I didn't want to get into it because more so yesterday was about people criticizing and defending. But I wanted to make this point today because it relates to deportation. Because look at that. Zohran Mamdani responds to Donald Trump's deportation threats. I'm telling you guys, this is getting wildly out of hand, and it is not going to go away because this is what Israel wants. Yet again, Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for New York mayor, has hit back at President Donald Trump's threats to have him deported. He says, the president of the United States just threatened to have me arrested, stripped of my citizenship, put in a detention camp, and deported. And this is real, by the way. I'll show you his newest statement. It says, not because I have broken any law, but because I will refuse to let ICE terrorize our city. Now, I'm not defending this guy, but let's be clear, 90% of what people are screaming about him seems to be shockingly either false, hyperbolic. It's like saying a Palestinian supporter is a terrorist or a Hamas supporter. It's the same thing. But I mean, my point is, there's probably plenty of things you could find with any of these people that are compromised or politicians. So it's really about the principle here and about how this is being used to set up the idea that people can be deported, even somebody who is about to become the mayor of New York. His statements don't just represent an attack on our democracy, he says, but an attempt to send a message to every New Yorker who refuses to hide in the shadows. If you speak up, they'll come for you. So even he is being threatened with deportation. Now, this is, I think, just an overlapping point to all this because this went crazy. Loomer was just following like she always does, but a lot of people came out and posted the video of him where he's eating rice with his hands, which unless you're a complete backward moron, you must understand that there's plenty of cultures around the world that still do that regularly. So the idea that you can somehow pretend that that's like, oh, look at how, what does she say? The word is like, look at these, how are the words they use? Animals eating with their hands. Aside from like 75 examples of foods that we eat with our hands, it's just insane what people will do. And they jump on the bandwagon, right? So Laura, as usual, did the same thing. And she goes, honestly, being an Islamist, which I'm not aware that he is, but again, I'm not supporting these people, and a communist, which the idea that you could argue a political mindset. There are communists in our Congress right now. And I'm not saying I support any government, by the way. I think it's just as problematic as any version that will eventually lead to the control of our lives. But the idea that they just turn the one version, that one, the bad one, because they're using these things to go after certain kinds of people. That's what it really comes down to. They're racist, disgusting, vile people that would go after whatever Israel seems to not like. But it says, those were enough for me to not want him in office. Well, which is it's much different than not wanting him in office. You guys have been waging a smear campaign on this guy, attacking people he knows and going after. I mean, it's crazy what these people do, yet ever suffer consequences. And I'm not talking about speech, I'm talking about action, off platform. But it says he is from Africa, and you can tell in the way he eats. My God, this person is stupid. Like, especially, like, not just stupid, ignorant. Grotesquely ignorant, like to a shocking degree. And let's realize even people like Tucker Carlson and others recently said she's like the grossest person online or whatever he said. It's just wild to me that somebody like this can be like positioned and propped up inside this, and everyone seems to think she's disgusting and crazy, and yet because something else is keeping her there, that just continues and has lots of influence and followers, and it's weird to me. I think you know where I'm going with this, that there's a lot of these propagandized, manipulated elements out there that are not really on your side. And she says, disgusting. My dogs are cleaner and more civilized when they eat than little Muhammad. Do I even need to speak about that? I mean, it just blows me away that there are, you know what grosses me out is that there are so many people who support her because they're disgusting too, because they're going, yeah, gross brown people or whatever the dumb things they're saying down in the chat. But what's hilarious about this is what everybody else called out, which you already saw, we covered. This person says, here's a video of you eating dog food with your bare hands. You complete clown. Well, yeah, guess what, guys? She not only ate dog food with her hands, which is that any different than what we just saw? But it's dog food. But somebody sent her that bag. We covered it at the time because I thought it was hilarious, to be honest. And the guy documented it all. When we covered it, of course, I proved what we talk about, and the guy had the receipts. He showed you what he did. He sent her this as somebody, like an advertiser, saying, we want you to advertise for our human grade dog food, which I also pointed out doesn't necessarily always mean humans can eat it, by the way. The point is that they sent that to her. They said, we want you to promote this human grade dog food, and we'll give you $100 to do it if you eat it on the air, because it's human grade. It's okay. You won't get hurt by it, right? He literally took a freeze-dried bag, created a little logo on it, put Purina in the bag, and sent it to her. And because she literally never does due diligence like Jones or anybody else, she ate it live on the air. And then he posted it all and said, I literally got Laura Loomer to eat Purina out of a bag on her show because I simply gave her $100. It was like, my God, this is where we are today. And so again, the idea that you're going, gross little Muhammad, my dogs are more clean because he's eating rice like his culture does in a lot of different ways, right? And a lot of different cultures, whether it's grabbing the tortilla and doing it that way or eating. Yes, that is, there's restaurants in New York and even here that are designed that way. It's just crazy to me. Now, the point, you're doing so obviously with a disgusting version of food that you didn't even know what it was, but you have the nerve to call him out for that. Now, it's not about defending him. It's about defending anybody that gets attacked for those kind of reasons. Now, same thing. Here's Mr. Mossad, who he was an acknowledged, admitted Mossad agent, or at least was, which the same thing in my opinion. Here's Zohran saying, I am heartbroken by the news. For the podcast, I'm reading this exactly. I'm heartbroken by the news from Colorado where Karen Diamond, a victim of the vicious attack earlier this month, has passed away. May Karen's memory be a blessing and a reminder that we must constantly work to eradicate hatred and violence. Now, because this overlaps with what is being warped into some demented hate crime, or rather, the point being that what he's highlighting is that that's sad what happened, and we should care about that. Violence is not okay, no matter who does it, right? No, according to site, wrong, according to him. What a snake. Gad Sad calls it, what a snake. Let me read it again. I'm heartbroken by the news from Colorado where Karen Diamond, a victim of a vicious attack, was this month passed away. May we constantly work to eradicate hatred and violence. And he says, what a snake. You know why? Because you've been spending your entire day trying to convince everybody that he secretly hates Jews, that he's secretly a Hamas supporter. Okay. And that then somehow means that he's incapable of having compassion for a person who got hurt because you guys, I mean, the gross person in this dynamic are the people that are calling compassion hatred, because they're so overwhelmed with hatred, or rather just propaganda, that they need everyone to think people that are fighting against Israel for political reasons, not because the religion they need you to think they're racist because that's his job, that they do things like that. Or this person saying, after he says the same quote, there are zero comments about the Colorado attack from Zoran. How do you say that? It's Zoran. Prior to this one, no condemnation of the attack, no sympathy for victims, zero. But suddenly, miraculously, he wants you to believe that he feels bad about the dead Jew murdered by a Free Palestine fanatic. That's the point. Oh, guess what? Twitter says, no, you're wrong. And you don't care, because clearly he did stand up on Julie. He did come out on the first and say, condemn the attack. So she doesn't care. So do you think she doesn't know that? Or is she just trying to pretend? It doesn't matter. The narrative becomes the focal point, like we saw with Waters, or I'm blanking on the other politician, where it just became this witch hunt where it doesn't matter what they say. The narrative is the fact, and they just roll over the top of it. The point is that this person's trying to come out and show you, of course he could be lying about it, but how can you come out and say his compassionate statement is therefore gross because we tell you what he thinks? These people are lunatics. And I don't mean any specific sites, anybody who is fighting for a genocidal entity and calling anybody else who calls it out a racist. Now, Ken Klippenstein says the New York Democratic officials who've declined to endorse Zoran. Democrats. Kathy Hochul, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Kristen Gillibrand, Jeffrey Meeks, Richie Torres. I mean, major Democrat representatives. So my point is, as always, the entirety of our government is completely bought off, influenced, and controlled by a foreign power. Okay, if every single one left and right, now it's not because what I hit? There it is. It's not because you have to support this person. My point is that it's obvious that it's the only reason they're at like this aggressive across the aisle force. I should say, despite his obvious popularity, which is what usually politicians only care about, that they're all in lockstep saying no. Why? Because Israel pays them all. And he is pointing out Israel's crimes. That's what this really comes down to. And Aaron Mate says, so extreme in their devotion to Israeli supremacy and mass murder that they won't endorse their party's elected candidate. Because that's the point. He won the primary, guys, in America's largest city. How will these people de-radicalize? The point is, he won the primary, so usually that's when the party goes, okay, that's what the people want, right? Or so we're told. But now, no, we don't like what the people chose. We want somebody else. Because democracy, right? It's just comical what's going on right now. They're showing you who they are in every single way. They're showing you who pays their paycheck. Crazy. Obviously, guys, coming out and calling out what Israel's doing could very well be opportunism. But my point the entire time is we should support that regardless. Just don't blindly support everything he says under some assumption that he's now on your side because he said the one right thing, right? Just point out what he said was correct. Support that one thing and wait for what he says next. Hold all of them accountable to their outcome, their action, not their promises. Of course, DC Drano says it's official. Trump is going to war with Zoran. As president of the United States, Trump says, I'm not going to let this communist lunatic destroy New York. That's what he said. Rest assured, I hold all the levers. I have all the cards. I'll save New York City and make it hot and great again, just like I did with the good old USA. I mean, I had to make sure that was real. I can't believe that. I mean, I can, because that's the kind of people we're dealing with, but it just shows you, like, I feel like he thinks nothing can touch him. That doesn't feel like desperation to me. That feels like hubris. That feels like it's okay that I can say I can do whatever I want. I can stand up and say as the president that I'm not going to let that guy be put in place, even though that's what the people want, because make America great again, because I control everything. I've got all the cards. I hold all the levers. Guys, it's like, this is exactly what people are trying to say. That's a problem. And they go, oh, you hate Trump. You're a Democrat. And maybe, but it's also an obvious problem that anybody with a brain can see is so far over the top. This is authoritarianism. This is dictatorship. This is I control everything and I can make anything happen because I want it. That's not what electing the president. There's so many people that have just woke up yesterday and think they know everything about politics that are like, it's a mandate. He can do whatever he wants. But I love the Constitution. It's dangerous, guys. And it's alarming how many people are out there right there. But that is so shocking to me. And this person says, meanwhile, Trump is endorsing the leader of Syria who's slaughtering Christians. Wah, wah. Yeah, but DC Drano doesn't care about that. At least he pretends he does in other contexts. But Trump says the man that's leading Syria was the head of some tough organizations. Yeah, you mean Al-Qaeda? Hayat al-Sham? He's a pretty tough guy. He's a good guy. The organizations are ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This is not a joke, guys. Trump literally just put this out. Or I think I've got it at the end of the show. Right here. That's what he said. I just can't believe that we can't be honest about this, or at least I can't believe that there are people that still adhere to the narrative when everyone else sees through it. But just again, and DC Drano with a fire symbol, yeah, who cares about Constitution? Who cares about democracy? Who cares about that's what New York people voted for? And again, you know my opinions about all that, but that's what they think. So he comes out and just goes, woohoo, go after the guy because Team MAGA, or rather just Team Trump. You should be embarrassed. How's that phase 2 binder coming, bud? Now let's talk about Atlas in the context of deportation. Now, this is actually really interesting to me. Now, this conversation, obviously, the whole point of people like that and the different two-party illusion dynamic and the obvious influence from a foreign power is what's driving all of this, in my opinion. One, the partisan element, the partisan ability to stop us from seeing the full picture because it's all divided and it's about division, divide and conquer, sort of probably what Elon and Trump are doing. But the obvious nature of what Israel is driving in this country is, Zionist Miller, guys, that's what he's acting for, is clearly driving this agenda through this country. And that's what this comes back to. The Intercept put this out on August 21st, 2021. Little known software can trigger revocation of citizenship. Now, I think this is really important because this is literally what we're talking about today as Trump initiates. This is meant to reflect back on the show we just did yesterday, right? This is about the software that can be used to rapidly go through and just decide whether or not somebody can be denaturalized. Now, this is one element of this. I'm of the mind that we're watching an AI like the AI addition to this, like on overdrive. And I think we're about to see whatever they roll out from that. But I thought this was worth understanding the way this works. Now, it says the Department of Homeland Security can scan the records of millions of immigrants, can automatically flag naturalized Americans to potentially have their citizenship revoked based on secret criteria, according to documents reviewed by The Intercept. And the point here, guys, is this has become shockingly more relevant because of the new memo and the clear direction they're taking, prioritizing removing citizenship from U.S. citizens. That's the point. And so knowing that they have secret criteria on which they use this Atlas software to decide whether or not you're one of the possible people should be pretty unnerving. Shouldn't it be the Constitution? Should it be the legal boundaries of this country? No, it's secret criteria your government decided. Yeah, that's where we are today. This is from 2021. It says the software known as Atlas takes information from immigrants' cases, files, and runs it through various federal databases. Atlas looks for indicators that someone is dangerous or dishonest or is ostensibly designed to detect fraud among people who come into contact with the U.S. immigration system. But advocates for immigrants believe that the real purpose of the computer program is to create a pretext to strip people of citizenship. Clearly, we're seeing this come to pass, right? And this is my point about how it hands off administration to administration. This is Biden's administration. Now it says, whatever the motivation, Atlas's intended outcome is ultimately deportation, judging from the documents which originate with DHS and were obtained by the Open Society Justice Initiative and Muslim advocates through Freedom of Information Act lawsuits. Now, I thought there was a different, but this is exactly what we were talking about yesterday, right? This idea of just rapidly not just passports, but that's the way you can see it in the larger sense. It's, more about, it would amount to whatever identification you have that says you're a U.S. citizen. There was another image. I thought it was up there. Where were we? It says Atlas helps them investigate immigrants' personal relationships, backgrounds. Now, here, this is what as I was reading this before, I kept telling myself it's important to understand, as they say, immigrants, that we're talking about people with U.S. citizenship today. Like, this is the point I'm making, because Atlas is used to go after people that are being denaturalized. right? And other contexts, but in the context of yesterday's show and the idea of removing U.S. citizenship, right? So as we're talking about this, and as we're talking about them investigating relationships and backgrounds and different things, we're talking about a U.S. citizen. So that's my point of why that is. Because if we're talking about somebody who is here illegally, most people think differently about that, despite the constitutional rights being the same, which is, again, what people still seem not grasp, but is the truth. So here, ask yourself if it's okay with you that any government, or any administration rather, within this government is choosing to go, okay, how about that person, right? And then the question is, we'll get into is why? What was the impetus? Now, the Atlas software is ultimately what does this, but the question is that there might be starting points like ethnicity, where you came from, or your religion, which is absolutely the problem in all this, right? And this is where we get into with these past discussions. Now, people in partisan fields seem to think that's somehow okay, until later it becomes your ethnicity and your religion, and then it calls matter. That's the point, guys. These are things that we should not allow to happen. But so back to the point. A U.S. citizen who happens to be from a foreign country who gained citizenship over the process, they start digging through their personal relationships, their background, they're examining their biometric information, like fingerprints, and in certain circumstances, considering an immigrant's race, ethnicity, and national origin. Doesn't that feel like if you're already here and you're not breaking the law, doesn't that seem like an over-the-top thing to do? Not just over the top, more of a justification to do it to everybody is where I'm going with this. It draws information from a variety of unknown sources, plus two that have been criticized as being poorly managed. The FBI's terrorist screening database, also known as the terrorist watch list, which, guys, people like me are on that list. People in the independent media have been proven to have been put on that list. So let's understand how flimsy these things can be. And it says, and the National Crime Information Center, powered by servers at tech giant Amazon. The system in 2019 alone conducted 16.5 million screenings and flagged more than 120,000 cases of potential fraud or threats to national security and public safety. It says Atlas should be considered as suspect until it's shown to not generate unfair, arbitrary, and discriminatory results. Almost every time we've seen something like this rolled out, or like the facial scan technology, it almost always seems to have this slant towards a certain ethnicity. That's not my opinion. That's what the stats have shown. And they come out and go, okay, well, there's a problem. It seems to not be able to differentiate between, Black people or Asian people or whatever it is. Then you can call that racism, or you can just call it a glitch in the system. The point is that these things are still used despite that. Now, they'll claim, oh, well, we don't use it to define, to make the choice. But yeah, in a lot of cases, it turns out that is the case when you look back. But it says, from what we are able to scrutinize in terms of the end results, like the disparate impact of naturalization based on national origin, denaturalization. So in removing U.S. citizenship based on where you come from, there is an ample reason to consider Atlas a threat to naturalized citizens. Again, prescient, right? This is where we're at right now. This is what is happening. Some critics believe it's no accident that Atlas could go after individual immigrants for flimsy reasons. Quote, the whole point of Atlas is to screen and investigate so that the government can deny applications or refer for criminal or civil immigration enforcement. The Department of Homeland Security refuses to disclose to the public, to you, how exactly Atlas works or what rules it uses to determine when an immigrant should be flagged to potentially have their citizenship revoked. But we're not going to show you how that works. So it's this and plenty of other points that make me go, especially today, right? From this point to today, how is Palantir not involved with this, since they're like things like this, which we show you a lot when we talk about this, right? Palantir's Immigration OS. Not the same thing. This is about facial scans, biometrics, and being able to identify where you are, which is everybody all the time, despite what they're saying. So today, with how it's being used and who's pulling all these levers and how that's secret, it feels very reminiscent to what we've seen before, like with Palantir and what was it? I think it was the IAA or the different platforms that are saying, it's proprietary and you can't look at how it works, even though you're relying on its answers. Seems ridiculous to me, especially as you have a group like this who's got a strategic partnership with a group committing genocide in the world that's very influential, infiltrating everywhere it can in the world. It says, to go on, the secrecy makes it nearly impossible to tell whether Atlas is targeting immigrants baselessly or not. Atlas appears to scrutinize not just individual immigrants, but also their wider social networks. So again, American citizens. Doesn't this start to get, I mean, I shouldn't even ask the question. It is a violation. You're getting to the point to where you're crossing over into speech and ideology like this, because you post something today about Palestine, to argue that you can go, well, there, like, you hid this from your paperwork 10 years ago. Hid what? That you can't develop your opinion about supporting a group that's being genocided? Or even if you did not mention that you support Palestine, like, this is what they're using to get people out of this country today. A 2016 privacy assessment of the FDNSDS said that Atlas visually displays linkages or relationships among individuals to assist in identifying non-obvious relationships with a potential nexus to criminal or terrorist activities. Well, there's a comment down below that makes a point about this, but the non-obvious. So in other words, you could argue that it might not necessarily mean what they think it means. Like through a second person that they don't know, right? Or a friend that they both share but don't know each other. That is what can, and as the article points out, has been used to remove people. Amazon Web Services, the cloud computing division of the large online retailer, was hosting Atlas as of 2020, which I just think is an indictment of it in and of itself, Amazon or any of these groups involved. That arrangement is one of many instances in which Amazon has sold its services to a controversial Homeland Security initiative targeting immigrants. Now it says, immigrants come into contact with Atlas, according to the 2020 privacy assessment, when one presents him or herself to the USCIS for some reason, of which there are many. When new derogatory information is associated with the individual in one or more of U.S. government systems, or according to the 2016 privacy document, whenever the FDNS performs an administrative investigation. This apparently can happen even after an immigrant-related decision has been made, meaning you've been given citizenship, for example, and they can come back later and say, wait, this new thing that happened. Now it says, among the FOIA documents shared with The Intercept is a USCIS memo noting that Atlas is used to detect fraud patterns in immigration benefit filings, either pre or post adjudication, suggesting that an immigrant could be subjected to algorithmic scrutiny indefinitely after filing is approved. So you're never really an American citizen if you never were born here, which some Americans think. I disagree. Once the system is triggered, Atlas, and so does the Constitution, by the way, once the system is triggered, Atlas eventually decides whether to flag the immigrant in question. But it's unclear exactly how it arrives at that decision. Now, don't forget, even if you have U.S. citizenship and you're from another country, you're considered an immigrant, guys. But most people today think of that as illegal because they've been propagandized to do so. How Atlas reasons, that is, its decision-making algorithm is secret. Mentioned more than once in this, and I think it is also very relevant. And although DHS documents list a handful of data types Atlas can potentially search, they do not indicate what sort of personal information Atlas will churn through to reach its decision. Don't you think we have a right to know that as American citizens? The 2020 privacy document states vaguely that, quote, Atlas contains a rules engine that applies pattern-based algorithms to look for indicators of fraud, public safety, and national security concerns. That's the real catch. Whatever they decide to frame it as can be whatever they want. A process described as predictive. Well, there you go. We're in pre-crime level across the board right now. It gives little information about these rules, but does state that it is permissible to use Atlas to target immigrants by race and ethnicity in exceptional instances, which, again, will be whenever they want it to be if they claim. A term left glaringly undefined. Atlas could be used to target certain ethnic groups or nationalities in exceptional circumstances, or should DHS deem it a security need, which we know can apply to any situation. Appealing to murky notions of national security and fraud is a long-standing tactic of the post-9/11 Homeland Security apparatus, and one that has historically permitted the state to justify efforts to harass or target marginalized communities in the U.S. under the auspices of public safety, or quite frankly, anybody, any ethnicity, any group. It says legal scholars and technologists have widely criticized attempts to use software in a general sense to predict national security threats, arguing that terrorism is so statistically rare as to be impossible to foresee by drawing patterns from a person's biology. Now, these are not like a partisan opinion. These are legal experts, technology experts who are simply saying, based on the data points, and then how rare, in a sense of just every other action happening, that these things are, that you just can't, the patterns won't make, doesn't make sense. And that doesn't matter. You see, because it's not about the pattern. It's about using this to supplement what they want to do. That's not my opinion. Look back through history. Look at how they've applied everything they've used. Same way. The 2020 privacy document does little to dispel worries that Atlas is making potentially life-ruining decisions on the basis of bad data. The document states that Atlas's output is subject to manual review by the agents who use it, which is crazy to me. I wish it can be manipulated. It also notes that the accuracy of Atlas's input is taken as a given. UCIS, quote, presumes the information submitted is accurate. The document states Atlas's output is subject to manual review, but then at the same time, their underlings are supposed to take it at face value. That sounds easily manipulated, but let's just pretend like that's not what our intelligence apparatus would ever do. The document further notes that Atlas does not employ any mechanisms that allow individuals to amend erroneous information. So alternatively, if they know something's false, so think about what they just said, that they're per a manual review. So apparently all that means is they can alter it in a way that is, I guess, whether correct or not, alter it. But then at the same, if they come back and see that it's wrong, they're not allowed to change that. It sounds like it's made to be whatever they want it to be, whenever they want it to be. And it says, and suggests that individuals directly contact the offices maintaining various databases that they use if they wish to correct the error. And as they point out rightly, the notion that someone struggling to navigate the U.S. immigration system would have the wherewithal, or I'd add the finances, which is technically included in that statement, to personally negotiate a correction of the FBI terrorist screening database or have an opportunity to learn of such an error to begin with, they say is questionable. I say is asinine. To argue that, one, these people have the wherewithal, meaning just, the resources, the knowledge, everything, to be able to wage that battle, let alone even know where to go about it, or even know that the database is what's choosing to deport them. It's just silly. And we know that this is set up so there's no way to stop it. That's how I see it. So from 2021, we're now seeing Trump take the baton from Biden. Whether he was rolling out this part of it or not, he was setting this part of it up, and now Trump is rolling out the next part. Palantir OS, again, immigration point. This is all interconnected, I think. But so that was from the last point. But overlapping this with the Bob Villain point, which I think is also include, these are, remember, just sectional things I want to include today. James Jackson says, new Bob Villain's upcoming concert in what's Cologne, is that how you pronounce that, has been canceled by organizers. Let's find out. Like Bologna, it's differently pronounced by different people. Let's see, right here.
Cologne.
Yeah, it's Cologne. I wonder if it's pronounced differently in different parts of the world, though. Anyway, so upcoming concert in Cologne has been canceled by organizers. Glenn Greenwald says, LOL, remember when people pretended to care about cancel culture? This is why I appreciate him. I mean, I think he's showing his principles when whether or not we disagree on other things, he's clearly showing that whether it's left or right, he's coming out and calling it out. I appreciate that. Cancel culture, guys, come on. I mean, really, we can't recognize that this is the same damn thing. Well, we do. I think most people see it, but the same people we've been making fun of the entire show clearly are not going to call it that. That's the woke right. There's the woke left. Now, what's funny is there's this weird sub-art thing going on where there's a whole other argument or definition of what the woke right is that allows them to act like it's not true. We're not talking about anything other than cancel culture of identity politics, using hate speech to suppress people's speech. I mean, it's everywhere you look on both sides of the left, right of the woke politics. It's what we're seeing everywhere. And he simply says, like so many purported beliefs and principles, it has massive Israel exception at the heart of it. He sees it. Isn't this what J.D. Vance lectured and chided Europe and Germany and UK specifically for doing? Isn't this what Elon Musk made this massive thing to go after the UK for because it was distraction? Yes, but they don't care now because it's about what Israel wants in this country, and Trump says it's okay. On the same note about Bob Villain, Assault Rod points out, musician, Bob Villain, death to genocidal military, death to the IDF, and New York Times, a scandal. Interestingly enough, going back to any number of the thousands of these events before this, where Israelis marched through New York or through Israel or anywhere else and said, death to Arabs, which, by the way, is everywhere, or where there's Oh, you know what? That's funny. I thought she had it. It's here. I can even bring it up. See if it brings up real quickly. Let's see. Now, I mean, if I shouldn't prove this to you, it's very public. But for those that might not know this, yeah, here's one right here. Israeli nationalists, this point, it's that common that just the first thing. Israeli nationalists chant death to Arabs in annual Jerusalem Day march. Now, that's in Israel, but I've seen this in New York. I've seen this all over the place. Weirdly, nothing ever happens about it. Not that I'm saying it should. It's free speech, but it's funny how it's applied one way or the other. So the point, as you already got, is that Israelis say death to Arabs. The New York Times says raises tensions. So ridiculous. But this is the same point, but I just didn't see that it said it explicitly. Yeah, see, the way they write it. Israelis march through Jerusalem, raising tensions. The annual parade, that's the same point. But it says, Israelis see the celebration of Palestinians considered an insult and was marred by incitements against Arabs. Oh, you mean saying death to Arab? Yeah, that's what it was. But the point is, raises tensions versus scandal. You know, that's just ridiculous. Obviously, there's a one-sided game being played here, which you already know. Here is Richard Medhurst. Sniping kids in the head, gang raping prisoners, bombing hospitals, bulldozing cemeteries, abducting doctors, killing journalists, killing UN staff, bombing UN hostages or Israeli hostages, using prisoners as human shields, mauling or raping people with dogs, blowing up homes. Israel, by the way. But yeah, let's condemn and investigate some unsettling chants at a festival instead. That's how stupid this is. Especially since we're talking about speech, guys. And I just don't know what world we're in where we pretend again, same point, that you have people on the right who are cheering on, I think DC Drano and the rest were going, yeah, Trump, call him out. When that is exactly in the exact same principle, what you were saying is going to destroy the country, or the worst thing, because you guys either don't know that you're doing the same thing, which is crazy, or you're hypocrites. Probably both, as usual. Muhammad Shihada says, remember when the New York Times told us wishing death to army soldiers is the most natural thing possible? Because, quote, there's a subconscious understanding that this soldier will no longer be able to kill their loved ones. They added an expert's call to make, quote, incendiary bombs out of empty bottles to channel their anger and hate into something useful. What changed, right? Here's what it says. When people are happy about the death of Russian soldiers, it is inexplicable, she said. There's a subconscious understanding that the soldier will no longer be able to kill their loved ones. The point is that people will go out of their way to make something make sense when they want it to, but then go after people they don't like. And it's hypocrisy every which way. This one's interesting. This is going back to Zoran Mamdani. Representative Andy Ogles says Mamdani was a card-carrying member of the Democrat Socialists of America before he became a citizen, which, as far as I understand, is not a crime. I think it's just as ridiculous and disgusting as any person that believes in a government-led society. Well, that's my opinion, right? But the point is that ties back to the idea of deportation. Remember, communism, socialism, they conflate the two, and national security threat, right? I'm telling you, we're going to see movement here. My opinion, but I mean, Trump's already screaming about this. So he's simply going, look, he believes in this kind of politics, and we're all supposed to pretend like that's the worst thing ever, even though it's just one more form of government that will all lead all of them to concentration of power and control of your lives. I mean, are we not paying attention to this so-called democracy? People are just willfully blind. But he goes, if he checked no, which I'll show you what it reads, on his N400 form, when asked about associations with a communist party, then he lied. Well, again, you realize that communism and socialism aren't the same thing. Now, yeah, they're very clearly similar. It's just funny to me how everything means nothing, nothing means everything when they wanted to. Get a plane ready. He might be going back. You have an American representative saying this about an American citizen who just was primary. He won the primary in New York. And they are trying to get him deported because of his political opinions. Guys, this is America 2025. Or let's be clear, America. And we're finally seeing it. But they're finally doing things that I think of crossing that line. But here's the document he's talking about. It says, been a member of, involved in, or in any way associated with any communist or totalitarian party anywhere in the world. Okay, well, who else can we think of that's a totalitarian party right now? I mean, you could say Saudi Arabia. You could say Israel. that most people in this country and our government are associated with in some way. But you see, it's selective outrage towards things that first of all, because you have a car, you are part of the socialist of America, does not then mean that you're necessarily part of some specific totalitarian, communist or totalitarian party. But he says, and this is my point, that it's subjective. There's no facts involved. It's about the allegation. But then it says advocated, supported or promoted any of the following, or been a member of, involved in, or in any way associated with any group anywhere in the world that advocated any of the following: opposition to all organized government. Well, here you go. That's me. That's anybody who realizes government's a problem, but now they're trying to create that opinion as somehow, anything that goes against what is their control structure, that you are a terrorist. I'm not calling for anything. I'm actively every day calling for no violence. That's the whole point, but it doesn't matter to them if you check that box. World communism. Again, I'm not immersed in his opinions. First of all, again, that's not something that's a crime, but secondarily, the idea that he has those opinions, you tell me, is that something that's well documented, or are they just trying to conflate these things? It says the establishment in the United States of a totalitarian dictatorship, the overthrow by force or violence or other unconstitutional means of the government of the United States, the unlawful assault or killing of officers of the government, sabotage, unlawful damage of property. Well, you could list off quite a few examples where that's been done to the United States by a certain foreign country, by certain foreign assets. And I'm talking about many examples. USS Liberty, attacks on American citizens, and lots of different discussions by Israel. Those things don't matter. I even pointed out that in the actual discussion we went over of the denaturalization point, that one of the main things is supposedly if you are part of a foreign military. But that doesn't apply if it's Israel, right? Here's what whatever this guy's number name is, 2B7C. He says 5B, right? Advocated sabotage and advocated unlawful killing of any officer of any organized government means all Israeli and pro-Israel naturalized citizens can be deported. It's not hard to understand what we're talking about here. But see, it's selectively applied. But overall, whether you think it, it's not about that too, or the point is only about him in this context. That's just making the case that they're hypocrites. Not that invalidates the other side of it. But the point is that what they're putting out there is trying to get this citizen deported because of his ideas. No matter how else you spin that, that's insane when you recognize where we are and where we come from. And realize that this has been building, okay? Do you not realize remember this just happened. Elon Musk, this is not okay. And watch the videos of this very clearly organized shoot where this guy's waving the flag in front of a car where he's basically encircled by journalists taking pictures, and I don't see a it's just like, a Mexican flag. I mean, of course, this is when you got the morons like Stephen Miller rushing out and calling it a Mexican invasion, even though 20 seconds before that, it was Americans who should be deported because they were supporting Palestine or Hamas. So which is it? You can't just switch into they're all Mexicans invading us because that guy has a Mexican flag. It's because they needed to warp this into something about an invasion, because that's how they made this make sense. Whether it's the deportation, they need to claim the Insurrection Act. He called it an insurrection himself, Zionist Miller. I simply said, you're being played, guys. It's very clear. And all this is to drive you into the position to think that this is happening, like we're being invaded foreign. And what's funny is in any other point other than the one that's obvious. We talked about it here. Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act declared unlawful. LA's orchestrated chaos in Israel's propaganda. Now, here's what Dan Bongino had to say, which I just think is interesting. Like maybe just is not popping up in my feed, which, it's weird how these things oscillate, which shows you how they want and don't want things to be seen. And, I don't follow these people, right? You could tell that. But for some weird reason, sometimes he's all over my feed and sometimes not. That's them, the algorithmic to control, deciding what they want you to see for whatever reason. That's what that is. It's not a secret. It's not a conspiracy. It's exactly the reality. Dan Bongino suddenly comes into my feed and says this. And what's funny is my point was I kind of feel like he kind of just got quiet for a minute, but maybe I just wasn't seeing it because him and Cash, they lost, guys. Their whole team turned against them because they were lying to you, and everybody, Epstein files or 9/11. It was pretty embarrassing. And it got like almost roundly called, other than the typical Jones and Johnsons and, who came out and were supporting them or what. And I stand with them, even though I disagree. Everybody else most part, were calling it out. And so now he comes out with adding to the sleeper cell point. As promised, he says, I want to provide an update on our efforts to defend the homeland and protect the American people from foreign intelligence agents. This is your FBI and you deserve to know. Now, let me clear again, as always, I would never doubt that these are happening or possible, but I just find it interesting at this time when I've never seen so much foreign interference in my life from obvious. And what this becomes is a focal point on everything else. And I don't see any evidence to back it up. Like, again, unless they put out a memo that I didn't see. Like, when he posted this, why wouldn't you include the link that backs up what you're saying? Unless it doesn't exist. My point is, you could list off a bunch of people and things you did without ever proving it, because the people that support you won't ask for that. This is Twitter files. That's what it is. But he says, this is your FBI and you deserve to know about the work we're doing. And also, I think even if it is about pulling away from the things that they're not doing, Epstein files, today we announced 2 arrests and the execution of 8 search warrants in San Francisco, Houston, Portland, San Diego. I mean, how much you want to bet this has to do with what else is going on? And this is more of an overlap. As part of our disruption of a sophisticated Chinese government agent ring trying to recruit U.S. military service members. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm willing to bet you that stuff's happening everywhere in the world. Not that it's okay and not that we should ignore it. But just my point is that I would love to see that proven. I'd love to see who it is, see his face, know what happened, how it went down, how you got the information. It says, we are mission focused on keeping our nation's secrets, technology, and data out of the hands of foreign intelligence agents, except Israel. You're literally handing the stuff on a silver platter to Israel, either literally to Israel or through Palantir or through Trump or through Elon Musk or through the 1,000 different 8,200 companies that run this country. He doesn't care about that or doesn't know. That's crucial to protecting Americans' military and technological advantage over adversaries like China, Iran, Russia, North Korea. Since the beginning of 2025, we have arrested 51 foreign intelligence agents for activities including spying, stealing, harassing, stealing, but I don't see anything else listed off. I see one list or one point of one Chinese ring and then a general statement of 51 people. I don't see any evidence to back it up, but again, I could miss things. This wasn't super deep for me today. If you have information on those 51 people, I would love to see it. I'd love to see who they are, where they come from, what the charges are. Matters, doesn't it? Because look, just like anything else, guys, the point is your government can accuse people of everything. They have to prove their claims. I don't care who it's about. The point is that if they're able to accuse people of a crime, they need to present the evidence of that crime to us, so we know they're being honest about it. That's the point. There's a lot more work to be done. He says, we have nearly 5,000 open counterintelligence investigations. How much you want to bet 2 people that are talking about Palestine or criticizing Israel or don't like the war in Iran? But you get the point. Oh, I thought I had something commented on that. I guess not. But, and that's what it was. A lot of people underneath it. That's what it was. It was below. Sal the Agorist says, we don't care. Give us the damn list, which is almost the most common comment down there from his own supporters. I think one more here. Oh, that was the one right there. So this is Ann Vandersteel saying, but 0 Democrat traitors. Did I get that right? And she's a Trump supporter. The point is, you promised that that Fauci's, the Bill Gates, the people that you keep telling us were hiccups all of a sudden, deep state pedophiles that were somehow, using USAID to do all that. They're all doing that. But you told us that they were the criminals and you were fighting the deep state. We're going to drain the swamp. And then not even a name gets released. Not one person gets arrested. Yeah. So you lied then, or you knew that and don't care to stop it. Only 2 things that make sense to me. And so she goes, what about everything else? But over here, Stephen Miller says, every single promise Zionists tell you. John Rich says, this effort is what I voted for. Yeah, of course they do, because that's what I'm talking about. That's the rah, whatever Trump just said is exactly what I think today. And lastly, a few foreign policy, a few points that I wanted you to see that we shouldn't miss. Michael Tracy says today, and this was yesterday, today is the Christians United for Israel annual lobby day in D.C. Pastor, despite the fact that it's pretty obvious today, at least, that they roundly dislike Christians, but I guess that doesn't matter. I mean, there's pastors, Christian priests in Israel will publicly tell you they spit at their feet when they walk by. This is about Zionism. It's not about Christianity, in my opinion. Pastor John Hagee calls for the regime change in Iran. There you go. And says his followers will be lobbying for this. It's long past time to do what makes Iran great again. Thank God for you, Donald Trump. So again, are we under the mind that America's already great again? Have we succeeded in everything we promised? Then why are we pretending that we should start helping Iran? That's clearly, that means America's second, right? I mean, come on, guys. On top of the fact that obviously regime change for Iran is not something any Christian should be. The idea of regime, it's war. That's violence. That's starvation. That's suffering. That's human trafficking. It happens every single time we see a conflict like this. And we're going to pretend like this is what men of God should be calling for? No, this is men of politics. Religious politics, still politics. Now, this is an overlapping point that I'm actually, let me see how much we got left. I'm going to show you that other way. But I want to give some of this more detail. I'm thinking maybe I'll jump into it on the next show. Now, let me get through it. These are some points that I said I would get to. Where we're at. Oh, we're under 3. Short for us. All right. So and I'll just go through some of these reasonably quickly. This point was not very long. This article came out yesterday, and it says they have no way to discriminate, Again, this is a Western media report about what's happening in Iran. And it says Iran rounds up hundreds for execution as bad hijab is enough to be labeled as a spy. Now, as best I can tell, there's a lot of this is grossly misrepresented. The point, though, is that I'm not going to say that Iran or any government is not capable of going after people for frivolous reasons or just because they want to control what you think. They're a government, guys. I do not support these governments, but I do support the peoples in these countries. And if they support that, that's their choice. The point is not that being whatever their government they support. The reality here is that a lot is going on that justifies Iran or any country that's been attacked in the way they are. Imagine the United States gets bombed by a foreign country, and then you find out that they use sleeper cells, which is a public thing, guys. That was admitted by Israel, publicly discussed by Iran. They had these groups that were dormant in Iran that, by the way, Robert's been telling you for years. And they jumped up in the middle of this and were the ones that caused a lot of the damage in the civilian locations. And if that happened in the United States, and all of a sudden they were attacked, and all of a sudden you found out there were sleeper cells everywhere, which is what they're really trying to push on you now to get you to think, that they're priming you. What do you think Trump would do? What do you think? Even if it was just the allegation, what they would do? They would use it to do everything they always wanted to do, even if some of it felt justified. Right? Scanning everybody, proving everyone's identity, making sure you're not all secret Iranian spies or whatever it is. It. Left or right, they do it every time. So my point is not to rationalize any illegal thing that happened, any crime that's committed against anybody. That should all be called out. But understanding that what they're doing in some cases, it appears to me, even if it's over the top, which should be called out, is because of Israel's infiltration. Let's go through some of these points I think is interesting. But the overarching point here is that they're all capable of doing things. And if they do so, they should be held accountable for it. Anybody that, violates the rights of somebody or, executes a person because of their beliefs anywhere in the world, nobody should be okay with that. Now it says, following the recent but I should add, in no way should we be the outside country going, this is what we do because of that we decide for you because of these actions. The people of the countries decide these things. That's the reality. Now, whether or not you agree with the international system, which I have plenty of grievances about it, the point would be that if they suddenly don't care, right, the government, that this is something they can go to the international community about. Not to then have them invade the country, right, but to then get support from foreign countries that can help them execute that plan. But that is how they abuse it today. They manufacture that, right? They pretend there's a revolution. They pretend there's shootings, and they want to help them. So I don't have an answer to that. Trust me, that's convoluted. But there is still the right path to take, and there is still the way it can happen to where they can decide. We just got to stop falling for all these government lies. Question everything. Look for facts. Verify. But the point is, following the recent short but intense conflict with Israel and Iran, as if it's somehow not happening now, this has been ongoing for a long time, authorities have launched a widespread security crackdown. This has resulted in hundreds of arrests and several executions. This large-scale operation is meant to reestablish control after the conflict revealed how deeply Israeli intelligence had infiltrated Iran with physical people. So executions, yeah, that sounds extreme, and I agree. I actually don't believe in death penalty, quite frankly, for just about any case. But the point here is that, as we said the other day, if you're a spy, most countries have that as whether treason or whatever the claim would be, as a death penalty. And I even argue, I think that's what they say in this article, there's some of the articles that's what they put back into place because of what's happening. Now, whether you agree with it or not, the point is you understand the idea of holding spies accountable that just executed civilians in the middle of your in the middle of Washington, D.C., in that, in the sense of what happened in Tehran. That's what happened. And so it goes on to say, in the week after the ceasefire, security forces set up checkpoints in Tehran and other major cities, urging citizens to report anything suspicious. At the same time, Iran's parliament introduced an emergency bill proposing harsher punishments for espionage, including death penalty. The judiciary also announced plans to create special courts to speed up trials for the accused of being traitors and mercenaries. Now, this is my point. Governments, like your government, take advantage and use this to crack down on people they don't like. And in many cases, will do it to people that don't deserve it. And I'm not okay with that. But this is what we're trying to solve in this country, and the same thing they're trying to solve there. The point is that all of this, in some ways, are happening because of what we're doing. Because you have to understand from their perspective, whether it's being abused or not, you've got people who are infiltrating their country, illegally bombing their country, illegally sanctioning their country, illegally, infiltrating them with groups on the ground, carrying out attacks within the country, assassinating your scientists. I mean, at what point do you have to at least understand why you might be obsessively paranoid crackdown like they're in here? Because they are. Not to be okay with any crime, just to understand why they might make those choices. A spokesperson for the judiciary said more details about the arrest and specific charges will be released soon, only stating a number of people suspected of spying for the Zionist regime have been identified and cases filed against them. This is the whole point. So what they're saying here is that ultimately they have arrested people because they're spies. Now, then you get the Zionist narrative that says that they're just killing innocent people, which almost never is the reality in Iran or anywhere else we're talking about. I mean, I can prove that over the years that they make these bombastic claims, but that's not to say there are not crimes being committed, which is what I've said that first for. But they're coming out over the top with claims we've seen. And my point was about the bad hijab point. I mean, these are coming from, analysts and people from this country discussing what's going on. And the idea of it being, having your hijab in the wrong spot being, that's why I don't believe that. I'm just going to flatly say, because I've already shown you examples of people that the law of wearing that, the morality police point about the hijab is many places largely not enforced. That's why you could see women wandering around in Iran with no hijab on, people protesting. You're being misled in a very, very strong way. And so the idea that would be the case, it just doesn't make sense to me. But that they would go after an Iranian citizen that may just be not so friendly to their government, but it has nothing to do with Israel, right? But maybe doesn't like the way they're governing, and they go after them because we're getting Israeli spies. They go, grab him too because he doesn't like us. 100%. I think any government would do that, and we should call it out. Now, Iran has charged 2 French nationals with spying for Israel, which is interesting to me because if your argument is that they're just killing people, yet here they put them through process and they present evidence and they charge them with being spies. I mean, the point is you can see that there are processes. People are being charged as opposed to just being sent to Guantanamo. It's interesting to see the variances here. It's worth pointing out. Now, Iran shut down airspace over Western Central regions. This was today. And I think the whole point here is that this to me could mean that they're just being protective, but I think it senses that there's something about to happen. Because if they shut down the airspace, that means that they know for sure anything else coming over is not theirs, right? And I think that this today, I'm worried that, the prediction, as anybody who's been paying attention would put out, is that Israel's going to violate what's happening, which I'm not going to call a ceasefire. I mean, they're stopped bombing, at least for the moment, as far as I could tell. But the reality being that Israel's still bombing in every other location they can. And really, I think this is about them building up. They lost the exchange that just happened. That's pretty clear to anybody that's being honest about it. And so this is about them regaining their footing, and they're going to come back. So the point is, when they want to, they'll initiate this, which they've done every single time before, in my opinion. No, they'll initiate it this time, in my opinion. The fact is they've done it every time before. So interesting that they're doing that. I think this signifies more coming. China, and long before this, by the way, has said similar statements that it's, their national security interest to support Iran. But they have come out recently and said they stand with Iran and called out Israel's lies and hypocrisy. I think that's important. When China stands up and takes your back, that dramatically changes the situation. Now, it doesn't mean that China is going to step in militarily when something happens. We saw that in other dynamics, but that's to be determined. But it will play a factor on the mindset of the other countries involved. This was on the 26th of June. Iran's defense minister thanks China for support on first foreign trip since Israel conflict. Just showing they've already been overlapping before this. about this kind of discussion in the first place, which tells me that Iran has sensed this was coming and China is, primed. China, and this was on the 23rd. China says U.S. attack on Iran has damaged its credibility. And this was from the 1st of July. And this was just overlapping with the Strait of Hormuz point that I think speaks in the opposite direction of what people try to say about this country. Iran made preparations to put explosive mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the reality, which the point is they made preparations. If you remember what happened, there were calls to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which they control that waterway. It's been one of the biggest issues about the whole thing of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in Yemen and why they're trying to find ways to get around that. And, they're willing to starve entire countries to find a way to get around that. The point is that it went through their governmental process and they voted not, they didn't do it. Which is just, it's crazy to me that, so Iran, or rather Trump and Israel can unilaterally bomb a foreign country with no congressional approval, and then they'll discuss doing this and then decide not to and go through a governmental process. And then clearly the point is they even have preparations in line, but didn't do it. So which means restraint run over, which is always what I show you, but also that they have a process. And not even Trump had a process. It just shows you that we're clearly going in the wrong direction. Now, this is fascinating to me, and I think there's going to be more to come from this. This was from today, and this was a group of Iranian hackers, which, by the way, does not mean that it's from Iran. I mean, they could be not actually Iranian hackers. They're pretending to be. They could be from Iran, but not be working for Iran, or they could be Israelis pretending to be Iran. Don't buy into the way things are presented until you can prove it. But there's been many examples of Iranian hackers, and what they're aiming at and what they're stating, it does suggest that it's not from that it's in of the mind of people supporting Iran. Iranian hackers reportedly had access to emails of Chief of Staff Susie Wiles and other Trump allies. I find that really interesting. Iranian hackers are back in the cyber war, threatening to dump more than 100 gigabytes. That's a lot of emails of proprietary information allegedly pilfered from former Donald Trump campaign. Remember, Susie Wiles was kind of arguably like the go-between in the whole like Zionist, a lot of the different points. She was arguably like people called her like his handler for a while. I mean, like people in the know, like that recognized how she was sort of dictating what things were happening. So what do they know? What do they have? What emails do they show? And what information does that give us? I'm super interested. Because I think if it shows you that there's more back channels with other, remember, this was as they were building out their government, guys, and I think it would show us a lot. What about the missing ethics pledges? What was being discussed? I'm really fascinated by that. The point is, we'll have to wait and see what happens, because other than that, these are just, statements. Maybe it's all made up. But I think if it does come out, I think that, I don't want to guess at it. I mean, I'm interested because it could ultimately mean something. But I will also point out that this whole thing could also be a ploy to get you thinking that we're getting ready for the cyber pandemic, the hacks and all that, which is kind of where the article goes. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Now, wait. Make sure I didn't accidentally close something. Oh, hold on. Am I doing the wrong thing? Oh, there it is. Reopen close tab. Oh, I guess it just lost the highlight. I didn't think I highlighted that one. Well, here's some of the things I highlighted. It was right here. It says in its second time that the group has it back to the Iran hack point. The second time that the group has hacked Trump's inner circle, which is interesting. According to Gizmodo, the 2024 summer saw the same hackers breach, so they claim anyway, breach servers and dump documents into both President Biden's staff and top U.S. media outlets such as New York Times and Politico. So not partisan. That was important, right? So it's not just, you could argue it's more of a pointed political thing. It seems just to be about, all of our government, which would apply to Israel as much as Iran, by the way. And it goes on to say, lastly, in a report to Reuters, the hackers assessed that they have access to internal emails of some of the Trump's closest associates. Susie Wiles, Lindsay Halligan, political friend Roger Stone, and even messages related to adult film actress Stormy Daniels, which seems a little sensational. And maybe that's just to get people interested, but who knows? Wait and see what happens. Now, on the point of Gaza and the last point of foreign policy, just in this overlaps with Iran, and this really is just sadistically disgusting. Mohammed Shihada points out today, Israeli pilots finished bombing. Well, let me make sure this isn't an old story now that I'm reading that at the time. Yeah, okay. So this is when they were bombing, as far as I understand it. The reason I'm saying that is because I was making sure this is from today, that I didn't miss the bombing. Let me know in the chat. Did I miss Israel bombing Iran today? I think that will be definitely relevant. I didn't see that. But he says Israeli pilots finished bombing Iran, had missiles left over, so they simply dumped them over Gaza, as they state in the Israeli article, to avoid waste. Are we actually of the mind that you can't just not use them and use them later? Like, to avoid waste? Or you mean just to continue to be genocidal and, well, we might as well bomb them while they're sleeping in tents while they're starving by the beach because there's nothing. I mean, you realize we already saw the map. There's nothing else happening. These people are jammed together and they're bombing them in these tents. There's no tunnels. There's no infrastructure. They're just murdering people as they try to survive. It's just absolutely insane. And the point is, they bombed Iran and just kind of went, okay, let's just dump them over Gaza on the way home. That's just how blind that is, how, the disregard for people's human lives just grosses me out. It says hundreds of airstrikes, hundreds of massacres, not for strategy, but to save resources, to save fuel. Now, I guess that would make sense in regard to not coming back, I guess. Crazy. In regard to, avoid waste. It says Gaza as a dump site for war crimes. Full dehumanization. Insane. Now, Ron Paul with Daniel McAdams came out yesterday and said, just as news comes out that the IDF commanders ordered Israeli soldiers to shoot unarmed Palestinians lining up for food, because that's directly from Haaretz and plenty of other Israeli platforms, it's a killing field. IDF soldiers ordered to shoot deliberately at unarmed Gazans waiting for humanitarian aid. It's just wild to me how obvious this can be. He says, just as that comes out, the U.S. announced that it has approved $500 million in new weapons to Israel. Just the kinds of weapons that are being used on the Palestinians who line up for food. And he goes, also today, the spending bill spat between Musk and Trump widens. They're talking about the division. I mean, guys, it's just wild to me. And you think that most people can't see this? When Ron Paul, everybody, other than blind sycophant followers, are aware of this. Everyone in the world, for that matter. It just shows you more clear than ever what the real problem is. We need to, the people that pretend they represent you don't represent you. Now, here is a doctor from June 23rd showing you this exact discussion of a child being shot in the food line. So first, the Gila Project put this out, saying the Gaza Health Foundation, Mossad in the U.S., that's what it's provable, by the way. That turned out, they tried to hide it, but it turned out that's largely Mossad funding and support that's going through this. And now, and remember also that Robert and I just discussed. Oh, dang it. Let me see if I can grab it over here. But as Robert and I just discussed, in our great interview, by the way, that's right here. That the ISIS-linked groups they're using. Oh, it's weird. I guess I copied the text instead of the link. Here it is. Robert in the Cash interview. What's next for the U.S., Israel, and Iran? And we talk about for a while the groups they're using that are literally ISIS-linked elements that they're using to steal the food and to resell it. And these are people that are now executing Palestinians as they go for food. So the DHF claims its aid distribution is a feel-good story. The patients our doctors are seeing tell a different story. Like this 1.5-year-old girl who was shot by a bullet close to the GHF's aid site while in her mother's arms. Here, to add to it, is Tarek Lubani. This girl was my patient. He says, I'm surprised how little people, even medical doctors and keyboard warriors, know about penetrating gunshot trauma. Let me explain what this X-ray means, how it clearly proves this girl has a gunshot, and why the haters are so very wrong. Despite seeing a bullet in her chest, of course, all the Zionists will come out and Hollywood and, just anything they can to deny the reality. He says, first, there's history and clinical picture. The 1.5-year-old girl was in her mother's arms, very near the GHF, quote, aid site. They opened fire. She was struck and started screaming, with blood pouring down her right side. On exam, she was struggling She had, this creeps me out, by the way, but I want to tell you what the crepitus apparently means. A grating sound or sensation produced by friction between bone and cartilage, and an obvious entry wound. The X-ray shows 3 clear signs she was shot: bullet, a chest tube, and three air outside the lung, which was the crepitus that they felt. The chest tube is to treat an air outside the lung in the chest cavity, and was inserted when the U.S. showed decreased lung sliding. The U.S. I don't know what does that mean by the U.S. showed? That's right. What this is right here. What they're doing to scan this stuff. I chose the X-ray because it is visually striking and clear. That's why the account, the Gila, what was it again? The Gila Project. That's why they posted it. Despite copious evidence from multiple sources and over 150 mortalities at GHF aid sites, 550 mortalities at these supposed aid sites. Some call the veracity of these images into question. The keen-eyed knew better because that's not and then this is responding to others. The point was just simply showing you guys plenty of other examples. The evidence is astounding. And I don't even think I need to do this. I think anybody out there that doesn't already know this, or people that are arguing otherwise, or people that either already know it's not true and don't care, or just will never want to hear what you have to say. I'm of the mind almost everybody in the world is shockingly aware of what this is. Now, on top of that, as they decline food or withhold baby formula, which just got reported by El Monde, children are starving to death every day, literally every day. Here's what she looked like. And there she is now. Israel is starving children to death. This is so crazy, guys. I'm starting to notice, by the way, not just if you go back and look at old things that you liked or shared, suddenly your reshares and your likes have been removed. At least that's for me. Maybe it's just me. Who knows? But I'm also noticing, like this, for example, that I just shared that the last day, but now it's gone. Yeah, welcome to just one more example of how this platform is in every way you can imagine corralling and removing and adding and, controlling the way you view everything. This is, forget his name, James Elder from UNICEF. This is why Palestinians are not able to fish and avoid starvation. We just talked about this. Israel shoots them indiscriminately. Now, that's what he's reporting in this clip. They try to go out and fish, and they get shot. Not new, in fact, but now if they even go in the water, it seems they're getting shot because they're trying to starve them to death. This is sadistic. Here are children suffering after they bombed in their tents while they're trying to find ways to survive. A child kisses his injured brother on the head to comfort him after both were wounded in an Israeli airstrike targeting a shelter in Gaza City. Here is a really disturbing video, the Savior points out, of Israelis mocking a child that just lost his mother. And if you think for 1 second these are unique, guys, it is honestly one of the most prolific things in this conversation. I've seen countless examples of this exact dynamic. Here's the video. And this is what grows hate in people. The idea that somebody can be so there's a child crying, her mother just got killed by Israeli bombs, by the people like in those uniforms right there. And that video goes around and they take that video and they make a TikTok of them making fun of that person's suffering. Like there's not even like a humorous element to it unless you're a sadistic monster, unless you are enjoying the suffering of children. Or you decide that because a Palestinian is the child, then they don't deserve to live. Or, this is a very clear insight to the kind of people they are and them right there. Not every Israeli. But yes, sadly, the evidence is clear that most of them are in a very similar mindset about this. But let's not forget, there's a good amount of people in Israel, Orthodox Jews and otherwise, that call this out every day. It just makes me sick. And we're going to scream about death to the IDF or free Palestine. And this is what happens every day. I mean, this is undeniable, and they don't care. They being the power structures that are still supporting them. So last, or on this segment, then I'm going to want to go over a couple of things about the ceasefire. This is really interesting to me. It just shows you how some of these people have just lost the plot and don't realize imagine being in a position where you have supported the genocide. The whole world can see. You're cheering on the starvation of children. You're cheering on everything that's happening, the raping of innocent people, the whole thing that's going on, right? I'm not saying that I know that about this individual, but the general sentiment of a lot of people how do you not see what's going on? In fact, posting it, constantly talking about it, and then attacking you for pointing it out. The point is that you have this effort by people like this guy, Will Sussman, who tries to turn in not doing something about what you claim is happening, which in reality is just people screaming free Palestine. And I'm not going to say that there are not people out there screaming racial slurs or whatever. That happens to people of all ethnicities in any place, in any group. People are out there that do those things. That's your choice to allow you to be affected by that. But his point is, here's the title, of course, by the New York Post, because they'll slosh out any nonsense that is good about Israel. He goes, I was chased out of MIT. Chased out. And it was all because I'm Jewish. Here's what he wrote. It was the privilege of my life to study computer science at MIT. But when it became clear that the university would not protect me from the ongoing harassment and threats, I had no choice but to leave my PhD program and abandon my dream. Or, you could have just not done that. And because of the privilege of a lifetime, stuck it out and had thicker skin, or tried to involve the police if it's an actual threat, because if it's a threat, that's actually a crime. But you see, that's not what's happening. This is people that are going free Palestine, or Zionists shouldn't be a thing, and them going, I'm being threatened, it's anti-Semitism, and then making a big public statement about how you're a victim while you're cheering on a genocide. Or as Hussein says, you abandoned a PhD, boo-hoo. Try being a Palestinian doctor in Gaza, watching your hospital get flattened. Your state is incinerating the Levant. You're not the victim. You're just loud. Now, to be clear, this person is, if you look at they're supporting Israel. So my point, though, you should point out, though, just because you're Jewish does not make you supporting Israel. I keep telling people there are Jewish people, plenty of them, that don't support Israel. So don't make that assumption. But the point is that those that clearly do and are supporting the actions of Israel and then try to make mean words enough to make you the victim of the day while we just watched 100 children starve to death and people get bombed into pieces. Sorry, bud, it's not going to work. And I also just think it's frustrating that we're going to try to argue that people saying things you don't like is forcing you to leave your PhD. Right. I mean, what was that old saying? Sticks and stones. It's just funny. This is the woke culture on the right. It's the same thing. Now, the point is, they've lost control of this narrative. We've seen this for a long time. And as I said, in the first week, they've already lost the information war because it already became apparent to me. Obvious even more now. Here's a clip on GB News. And I think it's hilarious. As Abir points out, the narrative is falling apart and they're panicking. I mean, what's the way they respond to this? And this is insane to me that we're still at this point where how far are we now? I mean, year plus beyond October 7th. And they're still stopping the conversation to be like, but do you condemn Hamas? You don't condemn Hamas? How can you not condemn Hamas? I mean, it's just wild to me. And that there's no moving beyond that. That was Piers Morgan's whole thing. And now he's moved on to pretending to be on the other side, kind of, because that's what he does. Mr. Fairweather journalist, if you can call it that. But this is just embarrassing. And the main point for me, be like this girl. Stay calm, be polite, just stay the course, because it makes them look ridiculous, just like this. And the reality is she's right, guys. And this, we've watched this show. The argument that they're making about this didn't start, this started October 7th. I mean, they're literally parroting day one lines that everybody knows aren't true.
Where was the condemnation for Hamas? Are you saying that what happened on October the 7th was not acceptable?
When you do this,
no, I'm asking
another people in the media do this. Again, it is to justify. Nothing justifies genocide against the Palestinian people. I'm here to tell you exactly what I think. But could you just I'm not going to stand here and condemn Hamas. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stand here and condemn the IDF, the occupation, and the role of Western imperialism in that entire region.
Fiona, hang on 1 second, just 1 moment.
I am here to condemn Keir Starmer and David Lammy and the British government and British imperialism's role in this occupation and in this genocide.
You cannot sit there and seriously say you will not condemn Hamas, who have
I can say whatever I like.
Well, you can, but I tell you what, the British public are watching you. The British public are watching you, and if you will not condemn terror...
And we just went over this. They don't support you, bud. The British population, which you don't speak for, even whether or not you're popular, clearly does not agree, seeing as how 1.7 million people continue to tune in through that lady's phone. And the last big special from BBC got 1.4. The point is you've already lost control. And you try to pretend like nobody agrees with this. Everybody agrees with the reality that Israel is the one committing crimes. Whether you agree with the sentiment of death to anything, the point is the sentiment was about turning the page, flipping the script. Israel's the one who we should be calling out. Whether or not you agree with what Hamas did, because I can clearly point out 1,000 things you've said a million times about the reality of how they funded them, about they let this happen to plenty of degrees, the foreknowledge rather, and how they could have let it happen, but also the reality that Hamas has probably shifted since then, and the reality that they, regardless of whether Israel made it happen, have the legal right to arm resistance, and what they did, on and on and on and on. These things, they hate facts like this, or I'd even argue more so, they don't understand things like this. Just look at them, look at their faces, the way they respond, like, but you can't sit there and you can't sit. Yeah, of course I can. I just did. And your only response is, but you condemn Hamas. I mean, it's just funny. I mean, it was ridiculous the first month. You think how far away this is?
And I tell you what, the British public are watching you. The British public are watching you. And if you will not condemn terrorists, people who have caused absolute chaos upon the Palestinian people, the ones that started this conflict, can you see the disdain the British public, the people of Palestine, Jewish people will have for you?
I'm happy to condemn terrorists. Let's start with Keir.
Condemn Hamas.
Let's start with Keir Starmer. Let's start with David Lammy.
Let's start with the people that started this war.
And let's talk about the IDF. Let's talk about
Who started the war on October the 7th?
I'll tell you, it began in 1940.
Do you realize he just said you started the war? I mean, it's just so clumsy. These people are clowns. And I'm willing to bet you that this is coming through his ear, right? These people like a Don Lemon don't even know what they're talking about. They're just regurgitating what they're being told to say. I mean, guys, you started the war? Is that supposed to be objective journalism? Because this is straight up propaganda. It always has.
Start with David Lammy.
Start with the people that started this war.
And let's talk about the IDF. Let's talk about
Who started the war on October the 7th?
I'll tell you, it began in 1948 with the forced expulsion
of
hundreds of thousands of Palestinians.
We can get into a historical discussion. It's not worthwhile.
You are so correct.
Sorry, one more thing to stop, and I'll let it play out. Do you hear what he just said? No, it didn't. And then he goes, well, we can get into a historical debate, but it's just not relevant. It's just like, are you kidding me? It's not relevant whether or not and the point is that anybody with a brain can look back and clearly acknowledge that there's much history that happened before October 7th. But the argument that it just started on October 7th, I mean, it's inherently dishonest or inherently stupid.
It began in 1948 with the forced expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians.
We can get into a historical discussion. It's not worthwhile.
You are so correct. In fact, the British were entirely involved in setting up the Zionist state. They were entirely involved in that. So British imperialism historically is responsible for those crimes, and today it is still responsible for those crimes. And what makes you so angry, actually, is the fact that more people support people like Bob Villan, more people in Britain actually want to see an end to the occupation. They don't support Britain sending arms to Israel.
Want,
and
that's what enrages you. And they don't support Bob Villan spouting out vile anti-Semitism. I don't want you to sit here and call the British public racist and anti-Semitic, because they do not.
She didn't say that.
Support Bob. You just said the vast majority of people support what Bob Villan said. You just said that. And
yeah, because saying death to IDF is not about Jews. You moron.
They do not overwhelmingly.
I think you're upset about
yes, I'm upset that there's a man who's been given a platform to spout out.
But you're not upset about 100,000 Palestinians.
Who said that?
You're not upset about the fact that the IDF killed children.
I don't want children to die.
Right.
Don't shout at me, please.
Don't shout at me, please. Like, it's just so beautiful right there to watch. They're drowning, and one, because she's quiet and she's deliberate and she won't stop because they just try to talk over her, but she clearly continues to talk. And the fact that they just can't stand that she won't cow to their cultivated talking points. I love it. Good for her. She utterly destroyed them. Here's another clip. This one says the IDF are sniping children in the head. British journalist, Israel's one of our allies. This is what we're getting. Like, it's become so cartoonish, and even people that are in their, newsrooms are now starting to say these things, but we've always seen that to some degree. Again, opportunism or not, it's what we should be saying. Yes, that's correct.
Start by saying, I do not endorse what Bob Villan said. I think the chant has just helped nobody. It was just a really stupid thing to do. I understand why there's a lot of anger, but let's just talk about Lisa Nandy here and Keir Starmer and just this incredible selective outrage, which I find impossible to stomach, right? She finds it in her heart to rush to Parliament, to stand up, to question and demand answers from a BBC allowing this streaming of this band, making this chant. She doesn't rush to Parliament to demand answers and concrete action on the actions that we are seeing live streamed to us daily of the IDF, who are committing alleged war crimes at the direction of their Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has an arrest warrant out for, again, war crimes.
Hang on, let's just get I hear you, and I understand what you say.
That's someone jumping in his ear. Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down.
Again, war crimes.
Hang on, let's just get I hear you, and I understand what you're saying completely. Annunziata, what's your response to that? How can someone be outraged about Villan and not outraged about people being shot up in food queues?
Maybe not. I just thought that was funny because that's what you tend to hear, when they're like trying to jump in and it's like, wait. That's what, it's usually kind of like you get the sense or something. But he seems to care about the queues at the very least. But here's what she says, and this is what's important.
It is a very different thing to call for the deaths of our allies' armed forces. That is going against our country's interests, and it is calling for people to be killed.
But the IDF are snipering children in the head.
Whether you like it or not,
Marina,
just
listen to me.
Israel are one of our allies.
So if they're because they're our ally.
Hang on, Marina, just one sec. Let Annunziata say her thing.
There are still hostages being held from a festival not dissimilar to Glastonbury, standing for peace, where the people attending were attacked.
It wasn't a peace rally, guys. It was a rave. And it's so lazy that these people just keep repeating these same lies. Also, a concert that was moved to be right in the path of what was going to happen. And they were also later used as human shields by the IDF, which is literally on video. But who cares, right?
Killed, raped, and taken hostage.
All right, Marina, let Marina talk.
But I'm sorry, children are paying the price. And are we saying that because they're our allies, we have to stand by as they sniper kids in their head?
And Hamas are using the humans in Gaza as human shields. They are using the people and the children.
Okay, let me just show you let me just show you the latest on this. Hang on a second. I know how strongly you both feel about this. I'll just show you just some information here, which is an Israeli newspaper actually called Haaretz.
There you go.
This is an important.
Don't you love this? Don't you love how irritating this? But for that woman, she's probably like, you could feel her blood boiling because clearly, even the way she responded felt like that was, the thing she was supposed to say. And this is perfect. Remember, this is what we just showed you. This is Haaretz for the podcast.
Important article from the weekend where they say that IDF soldiers were ordered to shoot at Gazans who were waiting for food. So that was a development. And Annunziata, the question is this. How can we be angry at Villan and not even more angry about that?
How can we not support our allies? That is what the country has set as our mission, that they are our allies, that we are on their side, that this is a war where there is one side on the right, one side on the wrong. Hamas have done the wrong thing consistently.
Wow.
However, everyone wants there to be a solution. We're not going to...
that's incredible. I just absolutely, you think that this woman doesn't know, I get the sense that she's well aware that that's insane and that she's just supposed to say it. Like, that's my personal feeling, like the way her face looks, it's my personal gut feeling. But so point blank with an Israeli article that says they were ordered to kill innocent people. And your thing is we have to support our allies. My God, guys, this is not the 1990s, okay? This is not about the Iraq war. This is not going to work anymore. This is not going to fly. People are not going to allow you to do whatever the hell you want as people. I'm saying the governments seem to not matter. The international community apparently seems to be inept, at least so far. But individuals in the world, we see it, guys, and that's what's changing this right now. Don't stop. It's important to make this as uncomfortable and as obvious as possible, at the very least, so we can hold them accountable when that comes to pass. I'd love to be able to think we can stop this, but look at how far it's been going on. Just think about how, the resilient Palestinian people and how they are still pushing back, still determined to stay in their own territory. It deserves praise. Now, these points I want to point out as well, as they're talking about Zionism and Israel and the different conflation of all of these. Khaleesi points out, and this is something we've been talking about for a very long time. The important point, this is like the foundational point of this larger conversation. Zionism is not Judaism, period. Despite all the claims and all the narratives, it's a political organization that is not even remote. It's hundreds of years old, whereas Judaism is thousands. It's not the same thing. It is a group that put together the bastardization of this religion. And that's why Herzl, the founder, was an atheist. That's why he wrote things in his books that you can look up right now that are horrible about Jews. You can realize that they wanted to sacrifice the Jews in Europe. That was in a UN document. It's everywhere. They aligned themselves with Nazi Germany in order to get the place they wanted. And then you're going to use what happened there as the justification for why you have to exist? Guys, this is insane. And it's been the same argument and the same manipulations back to the very beginning. And now it's just not working anymore. Now, this point is to show you, and this is the group. See this guy here as well. They're part of a group called Torah Judaism. I forget. I think they recently changed their name too, but they're a large following on Twitter. And they exist there's multiple groups of them too, but they exist in regard to the ones doing this with their accounts, exist in Israel. They exist in New York and London. They're all over the world. They're adherent Orthodox Jews, not just, a casual Jewish person. They're Orthodox Jews that adhere to they are the ones going, Zionism is a lie. It does not represent us. And even if you disagree with them, just that alone, you can't continue to pretend that that you're not Jewish if you don't believe in Zionism. It's just insane. Now, this point shows you Orthodox Jews standing up and condemning what they're doing in Israel and watching average people, like not Orthodox Jewish people, Israelis, stand up and scream horrible things at him and say, you're not Jewish. So the same old point. Clearly that shows you it's about Zionism and not Judaism. Nazi scum. Signs say Israel does not represent us.
Judaism is okay. Zionism is no way. Free Palestine! Free Palestine! You have no rights to Palestine!
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not going to be the arbiter of who's more Jewish. That's a silly thing to do, because just because you're not dressed like that does not, who knows? Maybe in your private life, you're more adherent than anybody. That this is being objective. My point, though, is that in a general sense, the Orthodox Jewish community is, like any situation like that, Orthodox Christian, they're far more adherent to the doctrine in a general sense, right? And so the average person that lives in Israel that's not really, that is Jewish because they claim they are by default of being in Israel, which is not the same thing. It's not a nationality, it's a religion, not a nationality, despite what Trump said in his last administration, despite whatever else they've tried to convince you of. And that's what they're trying to tell you. And that they call them Nazis and racist. And it's not hard to see what this shows you. Now, one other clip I want to show you that overlaps with this exact point. Now, this, as James Lee points out, a Zionist who's running content moderation for Meta, Facebook, enacting policy outlining criticism of Zionism, outlawing, removing criticism of Zionism, while claiming that it's anti-Semitic to say that Zionists control the media.
In addition to my work leading the Israel public policy team, I created a new role specifically focused on the Jewish diaspora. It is a privilege to represent Meta to Jewish communities worldwide. I am proud that Meta's commitment to addressing anti-Semitism on our platforms has remained steadfast, especially after October 7th. Our policies are industry-leading in protecting Jewish people and Israelis on our platforms. Our community standards include policies that prevent harassment, violence, and incitement, and include a robust framework to combat anti-Semitism. Our hateful conduct policy includes specific protections for Israelis and Jews. We banned Holocaust denial and distortion back in 2020. We changed industry thinking on this issue.
Look, even things like this that are considered wildly contentious are still free speech points, guys. There's no difference. It's a principal point. If you can say you're not allowed to say that, it's no different than saying you're not allowed to say I support America or whatever it is. It's just, it's words, it's ideas. And they have step by step created the argument of why they can shut these things down.
Designating denial as hate speech rather than misinformation. It wasn't just about facts, it was about protecting people from harmful conduct. We banned content with harmful stereotypes about Jews, such as the claim that Jews run the world or other major institutions. We updated our policies to recognize that the term Zionist can be used as a proxy for Jews and Israelis. We banned content claiming Zionists run the world or control the media, and we do not allow for dehumanizing comparisons of Zionists.
See? Now, that's the point Lee was making. The rest of it, the arguments about Judaism and so on, which are also largely misrepresented, and you could look up the facts for yourself, ADL misrepresenting pro-Palestinians as anti-Semitism, but the main point is saying Zionists control the media, which is not the same as saying Jews control the media, you understand? That's the point. They're trying to conflate everything. And the reality is she's literally, in this moment, controlling what you're allowed to say on this media platform. It's insane. It is silly. Now, I'm not arguing that Zionists control everything in the media. I think it easily point out how shockingly influential they are to maybe the point that they control everything. But my point is, I would require absolute evidence to say that everything, right? I mean, there's plenty of things that I argue that aren't necessarily seemingly swayed in the ways they might be in other platforms. So being objective. But if you can't see by now that Zionism, the political organization through Israel that's infiltrated the U.S. government, the UK government, all around the world, is not in explicit ways controlling what you can say and what the media shows you, then you're just not paying attention. And that's why people are trying to call this out. And that's why they're trying to conflate it with religion so you can be called a racist so they can shut it down. It's simple as it gets, guys. And people will continue to call me racist for simply saying that, despite the evidence, right? My own track record, what I do in the world, what I say in general, what I actually believe. They'll go, no, he wink, wink actually means this. No, I don't. But if that makes you sleep better, if that makes your lies work for you, the problem is that everybody's coming around to this, guys. Not the problem, but the good thing is that people are finally starting. The problem for them, I should say, is that people are seeing it. Now, we're getting long on the show in general, so I'm going to go back to this. I imagine this is going to continue for at least a little bit, but we're going to come back to the point of the ceasefire. But I'll just quickly point out, overview, that it's the same old stupid thing. And this is what everyone's coming out and, the one positive Elon Musk said yesterday, credit where credit is due, showing you, and this was actually, you know what? I knew I forgot. This is what I should have put on the other part. When I said in the beginning, there was the one thing today that I was like, that I saw today, it was from yesterday, that I said, okay, that puts it over the edge. It was this. Because with everything going on, threatening, he's on the Epstein files, threatening to deport you and all this stuff, and you come up and go credit where credit is due, and then lie, saying that Trump successfully resolved several conflicts. He did not. I mean, it's people are laughing about this. I mean, I'll show you some. The point, though, is that to me, how that gives me the very strong feeling that there's something else going on, that this is about fake division. Just my opinion, but facts matter. We should wait for what we can prove. But credit where it's due, where he goes, my representative had a long, productive meeting with Israel today about the Gaza ceasefire, which at this point, as we already talked about, was not even remotely what was happening. We can read about it here, where Trump claims Israel ready for ceasefire deal. And if you read about it, the point is that Hamas had only just gotten this information. And just before that, people are literally like this moron who's an absolute Zionist propaganda says, breaking, Hamas turned down the deal, which that's not what was happening on 6 a.m. today. The reality was Hamas hadn't even gotten the information. Then once they did, As even Fox News will report, Hamas, serious about a ceasefire, simply insists on the same old long-standing demands that have always been there, and they know that. And so they put forward something they know will not work, and then go, Hamas didn't want peace. It's just tired, guys. It's stale. It's the same thing every time, because I think they know that we see it and they don't seem to care. If even Fox News has to framing it like that, it's crazy, because the bottom line is you look at the information, it's the same thing. They're not going to allow the end of, they're not going to remove themselves without the end of the ongoing occupation. And the whole point is Israel will maintain the occupation. Well, no, then that's not, the whole thing has been about that. And they know that, and they're manipulating you. And then you get idiots like this that come out and go, credit where it's due. He didn't, or rather Trump himself going, peace, and they better do it now or it'll only get worse. Only get worse? You mean losing 80% of their territory and half their population and being starved to death and children dying in front of you? Yeah, but he'll make it worse, though, if you don't take the fake deal that doesn't stop the war. How does anybody fall for these people? It just blows my mind. Or, Pierce Morgan, like I said, huge, great work, Trump, Mr. Fairweather. And then this person simply going, accept the facts, except none of that's true, and it didn't even remotely happen. Or Saudi Agra saying he funded the conflict rather than forced us to fund it. In fact, we just send him $500 billion. The point is, guys, or was it? It was a million or a billion. Anyway, we just sent them lot more arms on top of billions more. And the point was, you can't claim you stopped something that you're involved in continuing. Just like with Iran, you can't claim you created a ceasefire and you're the peace president when you literally were part of starting it. It's just lazy, but people will go like the Gunthers and the Cat Durds and John. They just will say whatever allows them to feel like they won. Caitlin Johnstone, just to everyone saying the same thing. He did it. He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything, you effing morons. Hamas hasn't agreed to anything. And she said this morning because it was true. And now my point is, since then, they have taken time to look at it, and they simply said, no, it's the same old manipulation. We're not going to go for something that allows you to continue the war. And she simply says, that's why he's only talking about Israel, you imbeciles, you foam-brained human livestock. Now, I mean, I think that's true in some cases. I think it's more so just about them saying whatever he said that day is the thing, like I keep pointing out. Jeremy Scahill, this was earlier today, simply said Hamas confirms it. This is after the point I'm making. So they didn't even have it, and people like this were already saying it was over. Then they got it, and now it says Hamas confirms it has received the new draft of the Gaza quote ceasefire. In a statement, Hamas said its aim is for a deal that guarantees an end to the aggression, achieves withdrawal, and urgently provides relief to our people in Gaza. Important to note that this draft, which Trump claims Israel agreed to, which was the product of a U.S.-Israeli plan and officially relayed by Qatar. While Hebrew media claims the language on extending the ceasefire beyond 60 days is stronger, we have heard this story before. And then Hamas responds to it and simply goes, it's fraud, right? It's not what we're claiming. It's not what we want. And then they turn around and go, they've denied it like they've done 75 times already. Lastly, Israel's continuing to flesh out its bases in Syria, even though nobody wants to talk about that. Locals fear demolitions as Israeli troops set up new bases in Syria. That's not the first one, you understand? So this is Syria's territory now. That's the reality, despite American troops dying for freedom, we were told, right? And that's antiwar.com. And Dave just asked, is there a source that proves the new Syrian president is linked to terrorism? Because I think he was debating somebody. And it's just crazy that most people don't even know this. The U.S. government had a $10 million bounty on his head, even after they made him president. You realize how stupid that is? That's right there. That's the guy. Whatever I forgot his new name now. Jelani was the first one. It's Sana, I forget his name now. The point is they just gave a new name, put him in a suit, and then say, okay, no more sanctions. So the U.S. government is supporting terrorism. That's not new, but maybe it's new for people today. David Icke, make terrorists great again, so long as Israel agrees. Trump says the man that is leading Syria, that guy, was the head of some tough organizations. He's pretty tough. He's a good guy. And as Megatron points out, those were ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That's a public open debate, open secret. You could look for yourself. And Trump's going, he's a good guy? Again, just like with Elon or anything else, either they were never fighting those things, or they're now showing you that it never really mattered. It was only about the means to an end to control you or to overthrow countries. You take your pick. Time to wake up, America. It's very clear what's happening. Syrian Girl says, Trump supports Al-Qaeda, but we're supposed to freak out about a Muslim mayor in New York? Yeah, that's pretty crazy, isn't it? The Cradle. Syrian warlords behind torture, kidnapping, and ethnic minorities benefit from U.S. sanctions relief. My God, guys, how do we let this happen because of a bunch of morons screaming at the top of Twitter? This is not what we believe in. I mean, at least what I can see. And I'm talking about people that are conservative and liberal that are talking about this stuff, that have opinions, not just whatever the people in power said that day. Stand up. Lastly, the U.S. won't send weapons to Ukraine. So, of course, some people said, see, peace, president, except the reality is the U.S. is halting shipments of weapons to Ukraine amid concerns that its own stockpiles have declined. Oh, okay, so who cares about peace or that we want to support you? So either one, it's not about peace. It's not about upholding our agreements. We need things, so F off. Typical U.S. government. I don't want them to support Ukraine. I don't want to support any of these things. The point is, I'm willing to bet you anything. Well, actually, I can prove Israel is still supporting them. And the reality is that I bet you U.S. is still doing it through other channels, in other ways, through other countries' means and other material. But the point is publicly saying, we're stopping because we need them. So didn't you sign an agreement? Who cares about that? Also, it's not about peace because they don't care about stopping the war. They just want it for their continued wars in other places. It's never been more clear, in my opinion. Like never in my entire life doing this, how long I've been doing this, has it ever been this clear? I think that's exactly why we're where we are. Exactly why we're seeing shockingly dramatic and rapid changes to the way we understand this country operates. Do something about it. I'm never calling for violence, but it is time, as always, has been for a long time, to get out of your chair, find something to care about. Go out there and protest. If you think it matters, go talk to your politicians. If you think it has an effect, start your own show if you want to help people inform. But just get the information moving, guys. Talk to people. Like I said, start up little groups, have community conversations. Go in the park and talk about it. Play, it just doesn't matter. Just get this stuff moving because I think that there is a very small, a tiny, tiny gap between where we are now and where we see something change, where watershed moment, like enough people, whatever that number is, we are right there. And really, even if that's not the case, and I believe it, there's no reason we shouldn't push harder anyway. I mean, in fact, there is every reason why we should push harder today. Thank you for continuing to support this platform. Every single what we do, the long form the days of work and research, it's all free. We do it because we believe in it. We believe in you, and we want this information to be there for you to understand, to use as a resource, to educate yourself, to be able to articulate these things, not repeat headlines, but articulate the argument. Be able to have an educated conversation with somebody about things, not just say what Trump said yesterday, right? Or what Biden pointed out. Educate yourself. Be better than that, right? Get this information out there because it is making a difference. You are making a difference. And support this platform through that because we do it every day, because it matters, because we care about the information. Thank you all for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.